finding time and for your interest. It's really important. I see Olavo from Cabo Verde, but he's working now in Angola. He joined. Olá, Olavo, bem-vindo.
Bem-vindo, boa tarde.
Boa tarde. E vamos começar muito em breve. Colleagues, let us then start our meeting. Thank you very much for joining on time.
Now,
Thank you very much for joining this meeting. So one of the important things we have to do today is to then start by asking all of you, for the time being, to please mute your microphones. And so thank you very much, all colleagues, participants, representatives from many countries, for your time and for your interest always in these peer learning webinars. There are many new participants, new countries today, and we welcome all of you and hope we can continue this journey together. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Eduardo Castelbranco and I am the thematic expert supporting this project, which is the project developing the African qualifications framework. Monsieur Adoum, il faut fermer votre microphone. Monsieur Adoum, fermez votre microphone. So today we will have 3 languages. So for the first time, we have the three languages: English, French, and Portuguese. And the main substantive presentations will be one in each of these languages. So please, colleagues, you have to use you have to choose the correct interpretation channel. For a smooth interaction today, so just remind all of us a few rules of Zoom webinar. So please mute your microphones when you are not speaking. Use the chat box, please, to write your questions, your comments, your ideas. You can stay visible. Actually, in Zoom, you can stay visible. It's not a problem. And as I said, please choose the right interpretation channel. On the bottom of your screen, you see a symbol in shape of a globe. So this is the 3rd peer learning webinar of this project, Developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework, ACQF. That's the acronym we are going to use throughout, of course, this session. Very briefly, you have all received the agenda. You have also seen the web link to this web page of our event, in which you could find, of course, all the presentations already available in the 3 languages. And the agenda, as you all know, is focused on sharing of experiences of other qualifications frameworks, various qualifications frameworks. So we have today the 3 cases: Mauritius, National Qualifications Framework, France, and Portugal. We also have time, of course, for questions and answers. And we will have a discussant. S'il vous plaît, pouvez-vous fermer votre microphone? We will talk more later. For the time being, let us just mute the microphones. We will have then the discussant, Mr. Joe Samuels, and finally, as always, we have this interactive assessment using Mentimeter. Before we start, let us then discuss, or just very briefly have an overview of what the ACQF is as a project and development, what has been done and what are the main learnings from the previous webinar, the webinar that took place on 16th of July. And then we go directly to the first substantive presentation, which is then done by Robin Pulchund, who is the director of Mauritius Qualifications Authority. So it's always important to start by contextualizing what we are doing here today. So let us remind the ACQF vision. As you all know, the ACQF is a policy initiative of the African Union, and the ACQF is currently in construction. And this process is supported by a project that runs until 2022. The project has several components like a mapping study, development of the actual ACQF policy and technical document, and capacity development. And you understand all that capacity development is the component in which these peer learning webinars are placed. Let me again remind, for those who already who don't know yet this, because they are new in this process, it's useful, I think, that the ACQF is not an isolated policy. It is part of the ecosystem of Agenda 2063 of the African Union, of its 10-year implementation plan 2023. The ACQF is also a requisite of the Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2025 and of the AU Protocol on Free Movement of Persons. And finally, it's an enabling factor of African continental free trade area. So the ACQF has a vision to be inclusive of all please mute your phone. So all levels of qualifications, higher education, TVET, school education, other credentials, should be receptive to innovation, new trends, new technologies, open to learn from good practice, from stakeholders' views as well. And this all important to achieve the combined goals of comparability, enhanced comparability, quality, transparency of qualifications, facilitate recognition of qualifications, lifelong learning and mobility, work in complementarity with national and regional qualifications frameworks in Africa, support the creation of a common African education space, and naturally promote cooperation and alignment between qualifications frameworks, national, regional, both in Africa and also worldwide. The ACQF is going to be an overarching framework against which national and regional frameworks and level descriptors can be calibrated. We are talking about referencing or alignment. That's still a discussion of qualifications frameworks, probably in the future use of ACQF levels in qualifications documents. Very important, and all African Union member states are asking that the ACQF plays a role of a catalyst in development, consolidation of national qualifications frameworks and their instruments. A very brief also overview of where the continent stands currently in terms of qualifications frameworks. So from this graph, and this graph concerns only 38 countries, not the 55, is based on data collected through the ACQF mapping study. As you can see, on one side, we have 48% of these countries with national qualifications frameworks at the stage of early thinking or in development and consultation. On the other side, more in green colors, you can see that 42% of the countries, 38 always is the reference, have qualifications frameworks at the stage of implementation. Either they have adopted legal acts and started implementation, or they are already in advanced implementation stage after revisions. Let us then recall or just very briefly contextualize this capacity development program of the ACQF, in which this third webinar is included. I said earlier that one of the components of the project, ACQF development, is capacity development. And it is based on, let's say, a combination of two approaches. One is peer learning, an initial level of learning, phase 1 this year, 2020, until end of October. The phase 2, a more advanced level of learning, will take place in 2022, will include training, e-learning platforms, webinars, and also practical application. And the purpose is to have, in the end, an ACQF experts network, which can deal with sustainability of all these actions in the future. So we are now here in phase 2, initial level, peer learning. Let us also recall very briefly the timeline and the plan we have designed and already presented in the previous webinar, that it's important to always remind. Colleagues, s'il vous plaît, fermez vos microphones. Colleagues, please let us close the microphone. Thank you. So in July, we had already 2 webinars. You can easily see the country cases or the NQF and RQF cases that were shared. So we had Kenya, Slovenia, and the European Qualifications Framework in the very first webinar. Then in the second webinar, another mix of different cases started with Mozambique Qualifications Framework, ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework, Ireland, and now we are here. So we are going today to learn about Mauritius, France, and Portugal, 3 national qualifications frameworks. So today we don't really have a regional overarching qualifications framework. As you also can see, today this webinar, the third, is the last one in which we have European national qualifications frameworks on the program. So the next webinars, so we will have another 4 until end of October, will all be dealing and covering African experiences, but also the Middle East. So we will have a case of Bahrain National Qualifications Framework, a robust framework, and also the Arab Qualifications Framework at the next webinar. That will take place on the 24th of September. The 3 case studies today, as already said, as already mentioned, and as you have seen on the agenda, are Mauritius, France, and Portugal. Briefly, a very brief overview of important, let's say, features. Of course, the speakers will say all of this much better, so I'm not going to repeat. I just would like already to introduce them. We will have the director of Mauritius Qualifications Authority, Dr. Robin Poulchund. This is one of the frameworks with a very long-standing experience. Then for France, we will have Madame Brigitte Bouquet, and this will be a presentation in French. Madame Brigitte Bouquet is the representative, the official representative of France at the advisory group of the European Qualifications Framework. Brigitte has a very long-standing lead role with the NQF and registers of qualifications in France, they are now under the umbrella of the newly, let's say, established institution, France Compétences. From Portugal, we will have Madame Teresa Duarte, who is also the official representative at the advisory group of the European Qualifications Framework. So Mrs. Teresa Duarte has also a long career at the National Agency for Qualifications and Professional Education of Portugal, and precisely at the Department of National Qualifications Catalog. And so now, I just want also to point to the fact that today we will have the first 2 cases of NQFs of 8 levels, France and Portugal. So far, we always had experiences of national qualifications frameworks of 10 levels. And now let us dedicate a few minutes to the topics, to the themes that we are handling and discussing, exploring in these peer learning webinars. The reason why we dedicate some time to still speaking about the themes and about a recap of what has been learned in the previous webinar is quite obvious. These activities are learning activities, so it's important to pay attention to the topics we are exploring through this peer learning activity. As you can see on the planned thematic focus to be covered in this peer learning program is always included in the agendas of these webinars. So with this very brief overview, this scheme, we try to look at how we are covering these planned themes so far. At the same time, of course, we recall the cases that have already been discussed with you in July. And those of you who are interested more specifically in some of the themes can then look back at the presentations and materials that are all uploaded in the web pages of these webinars. For example, the wider theme, number one, which is NQFs in their context, objectives, evolution, scope, types, etc., have always been very well covered from the very first webinar, obviously, and also today will be well addressed. At the same time, what we see is that the topic lifelong learning, recognition of prior learning, or validation des acquis de l'expérience, or recognition and validation, certification of competences has not been at the center of attention so far, but today it will be. Mauritius, France, and Portugal will exactly talk about this topic. For just another point that can be of use, so the role and the functioning of regional overarching referencing frameworks has been very well presented, especially in the second webinar, the case of ASEAN qualifications reference framework. And also today, Mauritius is also going to talk about the SADC qualifications framework. A theme that is always of great interest for many people, practitioners and experts dealing with qualifications frameworks is the theme of registers, catalogs, databases of qualifications, because these are instruments that are fundamental for the operationalization and visibility, transparency of qualifications frameworks. And this theme has been also very well covered. For example, in the first webinar, we had a very good experience, Slovenia, also in the second with Mozambique, and today the three countries are going also to pinpoint and to address this topic. If you are very interested, for example, in governance of the NQF, have a look, for example, at the materials that were shared by Kenya National Qualifications Authority at the first webinar. Yes, this is a very full slide, of course. This slide is about the main features and issues of the three cases that were shared at the second webinar of 16th of July. Of course, I'm not going to describe all these bullet points, just a few very important issues and features that came up from the three experiences, and you can also afterwards look back at those materials and compare. Let me dedicate a little bit more time to the case of Mozambique National Qualifications Framework, since this was the African experience in the second webinar. So Mozambique is an interesting case in the sense that it is constructing a new integrated and comprehensive qualifications framework. It is designing, it is already, let's say the draft is very advanced, the consultation is going on, and this process is incremental. You all remember Joeffy Mukora underlined this point. It's an incremental process because it builds on the already existing qualifications frameworks, experiences and structures, namely the two existing sectoral frameworks that are in place, higher education and TVET qualifications framework. you will, when you have a moment to look again at the materials of that webinar, that this framework is going to use level descriptors based on the following domains: knowledge, skills, and autonomy and responsibility. So these are very familiar for many of us: domains of learning, knowledge, skills, and autonomy and responsibility. The competence-based approach, the learning outcomes approach for qualifications, is very well rooted in TVET, but it is also gaining ground in higher education. There are credit systems in place for each of the qualifications frameworks, sectoral, and they are different. The credit and the main public online register of qualifications is attached to the TVET qualifications framework of Mozambique. Now, looking very briefly at another case from Asia, the case of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, 10 countries, that has its reference qualifications framework operational. We are not going to go through all these bullet points. Of course, you can afterwards take a look closer, just pinpoint and highlight the most important objectives of this overarching framework for this region of 10 countries. And it is there underlined. So this qualifications framework is a hub, allowing NQFs to talk with each other.
Let's go, Chantal.
It is also, the main purpose is to build an area of trust for mutual recognition, mobility, and support. Looking then very briefly at the European case we had at the second webinar, which was Ireland, the National Framework of Qualifications of Ireland. You have also there the most important features all listed. Maybe just a few minutes of attention to some of the quotes of the presentation of John O'Connor, saying, for example, qualifications system was implicit and the NQF made it explicit. So this is the notion of clarity and transparency that is so important to qualifications, national qualifications frameworks. He also said, never too early to think about evaluation when building and implementing an NQF. This is probably also a very important, let's say, observation. In these recap presentations that we do at the beginning of our webinars, we always mention also some views and questions from participants. And here they are from the second webinar. For example, of course, the question, what is the role, the place, the possibilities of NQFs in the new normal of the COVID-19 era? Another point that came up was values should be part of the level descriptors. There was also some discussion about credit systems, how to make them coherent and some degree of harmonization. Then, of course, a point was made that, in fact, yes, learning outcomes are becoming a focus in many systems. It was also noted by our discussant, who cannot be with you today because he is out of Harare in Zimbabwe for other workshops. He mentioned that it is clearly visible that linkages between subsystems of education and training seem to be increasingly smooth or seamless. And finally, one point was made in the chat box about alignment or referencing what is best suited for Africa. To finalize, to conclude very quickly this initial presentation, let me then remind your own words, your own views that were then captured through the Mentimeter exercise. We will have a similar exercise at the end of today, and please keep your smartphones ready with internet. So this was the first question. The question number one was, which are the 3 key success factors for NQF implementation? And it is very transparent. These are your opinions. It's very clear: reliability, mutual trust, transparency, commitment. These are your own words, your own views. The second question was, it is said that national qualifications frameworks contribute to transparency of qualifications. What does this mean exactly? And it is also very visible that you all, many voted, the majority voted for the option, for the response that is qualifications are based on clear learning outcomes. And this is a very important point you are making, you participants. This is what contributes to transparency. Finally, the last question was, what are the main benefits, in your view, of the ACQF for the African people? And these are also your views. I think mobility comes out very strongly, as well as harmonization, but also, of course, recognition, employability we see, and lifelong learning. There is also an important word there in French, mutualisation, meaning sharing, unifying. This is also an important point you have made concerning this question. And so now we move directly to session 2, and we pass the floor immediately to our colleague Robin, Director of Mauritius Qualifications Authority. I stop the sharing, and Robin, you have the floor. You can then share your screen and start. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, bon après-midi, et bonjour. So these are the only two words I'm going to say in French. The rest will be in English. I'm sure it will be translated and it will be easy for everybody to understand. I hope everybody can hear me. I shall soon start sharing my screen just to tell you about this presentation, which is about the journey of the Mauritian NQF and its gradual implementation. We chose an incremental approach, very, very slowly, and very important also, we looked for consensus of all people around, and more importantly, to get their engagement and make sure that they understand what we are doing. So without much ado, let me share the screen and start the presentation.
Come on, see what happened to my class, Michael. Okay, it's scatter here. See me first. Can you help me, Michael? The thing has opened.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, everybody. Hope you can see my screen. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So I shall proceed on this basis. So as I said earlier, we have been around for quite some time now, some 70 years ago. But let me say that the initial years were very, very slow in taking off. All of it came about with the need to address a particular problem in our education and training landscape. And Mauritius being a country where we have people of varied origins, such as from different parts of Africa, of Europe, of India, China, and so on, we tend to have qualifications from which we have inherited from various places and different kinds, predominantly from England and France. So did the appellations of qualifications, which caused a great deal of confusion. Let me show you some of the qualifications that we had. And you have there certificates, diplomas, professional diplomas, higher diplomas, intermediate, and so on. So much so that we talked about, we were having what we call, or what was called at the time, a jungle of qualifications. And that's what it was really about, very confusing. Hence, there is confusion around qualifications, and we felt that there was a need for us to look at the national qualification framework. And it is in this context that the idea of setting up an NQF was first mooted, and it led in 2003 with the advent of the Mauritius Qualifications Authority. Basically, the NQF is about classification of qualifications. That was the first bit about it. And this was according to set criteria for levels of learning achieved. Secondly, the idea was to improve understanding of education and training system and the progression routes and access to different parts of the system. And of course, international comparability across borders, because from Mauritius, people have tended to go abroad to go and study, or workers moving around for going for employment and so on. So with this in mind, the NQF was, shall I say, put together as a 10-level framework with certificate of primary education as an entry level, number 1, and going up to all the various qualifications up to level 10, the PhD doctorate. You will notice that we have kept the 3 strands side by side, if I may say: primary, secondary education, TVET workplace, and tertiary education or higher education. And of course, behind there's the set of level descriptors, each defined in terms of the progressive stages of achievement and outcomes and complexity of skills applicable. So eventually, the NQF was used for various functions. For example, if you look at the different functions there, first is the one regarding standard settings at different levels. Initially, it was more for the TVET area. Second, we have the NQF used for recognition and equivalence of qualifications, where for all recognition of qualification, there was a level assigned, say for equivalence. We use NQF for accreditation of programs. Also, when we did the registration of training institutions, there was NQF, and then also for recognition of prior learning. I just draw an aside here talking about registration of training institutions. We even use NQF in particular there for when we were what we call registering individually all the trainers within institutions, and we assigned a level up to which they can be allowed to teach. So it was more about registration of trainers, given a level for them to be able to teach at that particular level. So what were the intended benefits of the NQF at that time when it was set out? Of course, like common everywhere, we find this parity of esteem between academic and vocational qualifications. I'm glad that it was not so much there before, and it is coming very slowly and almost in a natural manner, I would say, but it is happening in a good way. Second, it's about the pathways, education and training, how to pick very clear pathways. Third is about comparability of standards. This is under the NQF. It's about, especially with when we come to international benchmarking. Again, also regarding facilitating access, mobility, and progression within the systems. More about international recognition, especially for vocational qualifications, which is lesser known, awarded in Mauritius. Quality improvement and accountability in the system, and also to enhance the quality of learning and training. Which brings me to what is the governance behind the National Qualifications Framework, and what are the instances that look at the NQF or are responsible for the NQF. So at the very top, the NQF is under the Ministry of Education, but then managed to its operating arm, the Mauritius Qualifications Authority, which has a board at the top where there is a parity between the public and private sector in terms of partnership and equal representation at very high level. And that's under the Ministry of Education. And this is followed by industry committees, which are there for setting the standards primarily, and because it's very important that there's industry behind the exercise. And also when we look at the operational side, when we are registering providers to give these qualifications, or even the accreditation of all the training programs, there's the accreditation committee. And also when you look at the quality aspects, the quality audit panels, all of these have equal representation, both from the public and private sector. In particular, the last one in the audit, we have more of the education people and industry people together to effect the audit of the whatever is happening at all levels. So even from the development of qualifications to the provision of training and learning, up to the assessment, all there we have the quality audit panels. With regard to the NQF, what we are witnessing now is the change happening very, very slowly, and it's very interesting that I share this with you. There is a shift from what the NQF was there before on the periphery of things happening, but it's now moving into the mainstream of education and training. I don't know how to explain this in better detail, but I'll try to say that with the reforms that are being undertaken currently at primary, secondary level, or even higher education or in TVET sector, you find that the NQF is coming out in a very big way to be used as almost as the backbone of what is happening, but it is more and more present in the discourse, more and more present where people are constantly now at all levels of learning, continually referring to the qualifications framework, whereas before it was more or less the TVET area that was closer to the NQF, and that's where we initially started from. And with that, we have also seen more and more widespread adoption of the learning outcomes approach. Again, the TVET people were first to go towards that, and now we're increasingly seeing in higher education, this is already happening. Especially, we have started with the engineering profession, with the Washington Accord and all that. We are seeing now in all other learning at higher education, this is happening too. So this is one very good thing around the NQF. And also very important we've seen is this commonly agreed credit system, whereas there were subsystems, if I may say, before, more particularly started again in the TVET area. We are seeing it happening also now, get the conversation going around to have an agreed credit system. And this is a very interesting area of work that we are doing currently. So whereas the focus has been mainly on the TVET sector, where national qualifications have developed in a big way, this has happened within the TVET area for various sectors. Let me share with you, for example, a series of qualifications or national certificates in the tourism and hospitality area, which is what we started off initially. Remember, Mauritius is a tourist destination, not doing very well at the moment with COVID and all that, and not to mention the oil spill that we just had, very bad. We still have our borders closed, but we are using, in fact, the opportunity to do a lot of work around qualifications in this area, tourism and hospitality. And this is just one example of a series of qualification in this area. Number one, contributor to GDP, tourism and hospitality. The second one would be, for example, in the ICT area, a series of qualifications they are developed. ICT is also a big industry in Mauritius now. These qualifications, you'd easily obtain them from our registers, which we have developed. And the registers will give out full information, what are these qualifications about, the learning outcomes, the performance criteria and range statement, and so on, whatever there is in the components of qualification. So with this in mind, let me now move on to another topic that is of interest, that will be interest to the RPL, because all the qualifications that we have, aside from going through the provider route where teaching and learning takes place, we have also now introduced the recognition of prior learning, which is something which is started out again in the tourism and hospitality management area. That is because there are many people who are experienced in these professions, and they needed qualifications. So that's why we started tourism and hospitality as a first area where we will be doing the RPL. So we had a initial model. It's a bit complicated, so I won't go into the detail. Let me say some of the revisions that we have done around this. So now we have a 4-step process in the RPL, and the 4 of them are pre-application, pre-screening, facilitation, and assessment. Right. So what we have added there is the pre-application. You know, RPL, as we have experienced it, is very difficult, especially for people who may have dropped out of school and have gone to work and don't have formal qualifications per se, which is what it's meant for. But you see, they have this difficulty when they come forward for application. So we put a step called pre-application, and it is where we offer guidance, or we literally handhold people to understand what this process is about before they actually come into the pre-screening, where the application is formally put forward. And so this pre-application is something very, very important for us. Otherwise, if we don't do this correctly or properly, then we have found that there are lots of dropouts in this process. So this new part there has helped us greatly in accompanying our candidates for RPL into the pre-screening. And when it comes to facilitation, it's about this portfolio development, where designated facilitators are assigned to candidates to accompany them in the process of developing their portfolio. And this also has been quite a difficult area, because if it is not done properly, then we have witnessed quite a few people who drop out and cannot make it to the assessment. And of course, coming to the assessment itself, we have had very good examples of assessment that has been done in the tourism and hospitality area. In fact, many of the people who have come out of the RPL process in this sector in particular have been found to be very, very good in the work that they do eventually when going back to their own employment area. So these 4 process steps in this process now has been done to enable RPL to happen. And I must say that now if we have started with RPL at sort of a middle level of the framework, at say level 3 of the national qualifications framework, 3 out of from the 10 levels, which is somewhere slightly at the middle. We have the next step we are doing now is we are moving to higher levels with regard to the RPL, because we have found to be quite useful to give opportunity to people who are, say, at the supervisory or middle management level, who have a lot of experience. Some people are very well experienced in the tourism area, for example. In the you find some chefs or executive chefs, for that matter, who have reached such high level and very proficient, but do not have this formal qualification. And once they do have the qualification, they can move on to more managerial positions, of course, with further learning and so on. So this is a very good move that has taken place with regard to moving to higher levels of the NQF. So currently, we're at level 3. We have moved up to 4, 5, up to level 6, which is a diploma level of the NQF. This is one good thing that has happened. The next one is also funding support. Whereas before candidates had to pay for their own to be able to access the RPL process. Now we have come up with a funding mechanism where this is completely free. In fact, in Mauritius, education is all free at all levels for all students. RPL was not. So we have now been able to secure funding that allows RPL candidates to access this scheme totally free. We also, by the way, have transport, which is free in this the free education system in Mauritius. So this is around RPL. The next thing I want to talk about is the key milestones of the NQF, therefore, in this journey, like I said earlier, how we have moved very, very slowly, stepwise in different things. Right, in the first instance, in the development of qualifications, what was there before as national trade certificate? Well, it's not just a change of name to national certificate, it's the learning outcomes approach has been used significantly, in fact, totally in this area. So that was a major step in the beginning of the putting up of the framework with regard to the learning outcomes. Second is there is a whole quality assurance system that goes behind this the whole NQF. Whether you take development of qualifications, whether you take, for example, the delivery of delivery of training within the institutions, there is a new quality assurance system that we have put up with. And in fact, it gives responsibility to the institutions with regard to their own governance, with regard to how they conduct learning, assessment, learner feedback, and so on. It's all behind a quality assurance system, which then of which there is an audit that is done around. The other thing is which we just talked about is regarding the introduction of an RPL system. I just spoke about it. This is new, and in fact, we are having an enhanced system now with a new step that I just added, and also with the funding support. What is interesting also is the growing network that we have with MOUs with foreign countries. And in the course of the work, we have sort of met many colleagues from different countries, and we have sort of shared experiences, whether nearer home within the Indian Ocean, like Seychelles or Madagascar, or even further across in Africa, SADC, in first instance in Africa. And we have also gone as far as in the Caribbean with one particular country, the Barbados, which we got to work together around what was called the transnational qualifications framework, which is one around for small island states within the Commonwealth. There was a TQF framework there, and for which we have also done some referencing. And the work we do with Barbados is in that context. So we are sharing experiences with other countries and learning also a lot on the way things are done to be able to put in practice in Mauritius. And also a big exercise was in our own region, the SADC, the exercise done with respect to the SADCQF. And here this has been a very good how shall I say, a good journey for us to be able to do this exercise, because it has allowed us to do some rethinking ourselves in line with what were there as criteria that were required for alignment with the SADCQF. Let me just very quickly go through all of them. See, so it looks at what are the responsibilities of the relevant national bodies that look at the NQF. There's also the link between the NQF levels and the descriptors at SADCQF. Then how far the NQF is based on learning outcomes and credit systems, transparency of procedures, including on the NQF. All these are criteria. The QA system, the agreement of the relevant QA bodies within the country, and the competent national bodies that certify alignment with the NQF with the SADC. This is an important one because it's very important also that all the bodies that are concerned do certify, and it goes very high level in the country, even up to the top level of government at the level of cabinet. So what the methodology, I won't go through in detail with that, but basically it's about having a committee at the national level. You do a self-assessment exercise and produce a report based on evidence. And then of course, there's a submission of this report and the approval process that takes place at the level of SADC. And lastly, therefore, it's published on the official platform. What this gives us in terms of outcome is that I just mentioned official platform that it's published. And secondly, eventually, then we will use in all our documentation, the relevant SADCQF level, which we will mention in this document, our documentation. So in a way, this is also quite similar, probably quite similar to what type of work that we will probably be called upon to do for the African region, all of Africa. And this allows us, therefore, for all the mobility that will take place between the people who go for work or for further learning within here for SADC within the region in the community. So I have come to I just wanted to add a little bit very quickly regarding the COVID situation. Of course, like in many countries which was very badly affected, fortunately Mauritius, we are now COVID safe. We haven't had any for the past 3-4 months now, although our borders remain closed for the time being. Anybody coming in has to go to quarantine and so on. The thing is, the COVID situation has also forced us now to look at the way we do things in terms of going online, going for assessment online, and it will affect in many ways. Something we will have to talk about in greater detail, but it will be part of the NQF as well. So this brings me therefore to the end of the presentation. In case there are any questions, then we'll be able to take them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. I think we should all give a round of applaudissements because it was a very clear, pertinent presentation. Thank you. Now we have immediately time for some questions and answers. And I know the colleagues from Sierra Leone had 1 or 2 questions they wanted to immediately ask during this initial moment. Please, Director, would you like to ask 1 or 2 questions that are important for Sierra Leone process, current process? Please, you can unmute your microphone and speak.
Thank you very much. It's a very good presentation. I was privileged to go on a study tour to Mauritius in 2007, and one institution we visited was the Mauritius Qualifications Authority. So each time we are discussing our Tibet in Sierra Leone, we reference Mauritius. We want to congratulate them. Right.
Thank you.
Right. We in Sierra Leone seem to be in a hurry. There are our superiors who want us to have an NQF within the next couple of months. Now, having gone to Mauritius, I know there are procedures, there are systems, but is there a way we can have a shortcut so that we learn from all the countries? We combine all the ideas from the countries so that we have a shortcut, because bosses are on our heads for us to have this in a couple of months. Or is it straightforward, not possible in a couple of months? Question number 1. Go ahead, then I can go on to the next question.
Okay, I just would like to say thank you very much. This is a very interesting fundamental question. you remember the graph I showed in the beginning, many of the countries on the continent are at the stage of early thinking, development and consultation. So your question is really incredibly just practical and to the point. Thank you very much. Let us then ask Robin for an opinion about this. And naturally, throughout these webinars, we will be talking about this question. Thank you. Robin, would you have a view?
I can only say that it is a journey, as I started, a journey that takes quite a bit of time. And every journey that's long starts with a single step. And I started by saying we needed consensus and also going incremental and getting engagement of people. And that is what really takes time. If you know the destination, then you can start the steps. So what is also difficult is, so what is a destination? Where do we want to go? That is something that can be talked about before taking that single step. But my own view is that it is not feasible in very short time, to be very honest. It's better to go step by step, slowly. And I think it will pick up, almost like a chapter in a book, with chapters unfolding as you walk, as you go through the book, unfolding. That's the way I look at it.
If you have another short question, we can also address it at this moment. You or another colleague.
We would like to.
Oui, bonjour.
Go ahead.
Bonjour, c'est Mamadou.
Monsieur Mamadou Sarr.
Voilà, merci beaucoup. Ah, j'écris la question. D'accord.
Allez-y. Okay, very good. Excellent. Any other question now immediately? If not, please write on the chat box. We will have time in the end to reply to questions. Okay. So since we have now concluded then the session 2 that was dedicated to Mauritius National Qualifications Framework, and what was very clear is that this is a journey, as Robin just underlined. The qualifications framework has entered in the new phase. Let's say the challenges, problematic and issues addressed in the beginning have changed in the meanwhile, and therefore also the solutions and the ways to address the new ambitions and aspirations of this framework. Probably this is very important to bear in mind. Frameworks cannot remain static. They evolve, they adjust to new contexts and new demands. Let us then move to session 3. Brigitte Bouquet, she is ready. We see her, and she's going to share her screen. And Brigitte is going to present in French, and you will also see the presentation in French. But of course, please, you have, of course, the interpretation. And of course, you have also all the presentations on the web link of this webinar. And this presentation is available in English, French, and Portuguese. Brigitte, whenever you want, you can share your screen.
You see them?
Pas encore.
Ah.
Donc, tu dois utiliser le bouton vert en bas, Share Screen. Oui, avec la présentation.
C'est bon là?
La présentation, tu l'ouvres, tu cliques le Share Screen. Vas-y,
C'est fait.
c'est l'apprentissage. Hein.
Non, non, c'est fait.
C'est fait. Sinon, pour ne pas... On peut aussi faire le share screen de notre côté et puis tu nous diras de changer les slides, si tu veux. Tu veux essayer encore?
Ouais. Parce
Vas-y.
que moi, je vois ma présentation. Hein.
OK. Donc, tu dois cliquer encore share. Hein, quand tu es sur la présentation, déjà, tu cliques encore une fois share. On ne voit pas ta présentation.
Je suis désolée.
Aucun problème.
Tu la prends? Je ne comprends pas. D'affichage.
So we can also do it for you,
Yes, please.
Brigitte.
I'm sorry.
Ah, ça va, très bien, excellent.
C'est bon? Vous voyez là?
Bien, tu peux y aller.
Ok. Merci beaucoup. Excusez-moi pour ces problèmes techniques. Je vais essayer de vous présenter le cadre français, mais auparavant, je vais vous présenter un tout petit peu notre système, parce que le répertoire, le cadre national, c'est quelque chose, mais on a dans un paysage beaucoup de certifications de type professionnel, des micro-certificats, on a plein de choses dans un pays. Et notre idée depuis le début en France, c'est de ne pas tout mettre dans notre cadre national. Ne doit aller dans le cadre national que ce qui doit avoir des niveaux. Donc, au fur et à mesure du temps, on s'est aperçu qu'il fallait, que c'était mieux pour nous, mais peut-être Teresa aussi en reparlera pour le Portugal, que pour nous, il pouvait y avoir des diplômes, il pouvait y avoir des certifications, il pouvait y avoir des tas d'objets dans un système, mais qu'il y en avait certains qui méritaient un niveau, parce qu'on pouvait le comparer avec d'autres certifications, parce qu'il correspondait à notre conception d'un cadre national. Et il y avait des certifications, des formations qui étaient très importantes pour le marché du travail, mais qui n'avaient pas forcément toutes les caractéristiques pour avoir un niveau. Donc nous avons, depuis quelques années, en France, un système qui est le répertoire national des certifications professionnelles, qui porte les certifications qui ont un niveau du cadre national, et on a ce qu'on appelle un répertoire spécifique qui n'a pas de niveau, dans lequel on peut mettre des certifications, des habilitations par exemple, ou ce qu'on appelle licenses, hein, ce qu'il faut pour faire des immeubles de grande hauteur, pour faire un certain nombre de choses, mais qui ne sont pas forcément constitutifs d'un métier. Parce que notre répertoire, eh ben, il s'appelle déjà les certifications professionnelles. On a un cadre national, nous, qui est très tourné vers le marché de l'emploi. Donc, on enregistre des certifications professionnelles avec un niveau de qualification. Et cet enregistrement ne peut se faire que si les certifications sont décrites de telle manière qu'elles permettent, et sont organisées de telle manière qu'elles permettent une validation des acquis de l'expérience. Donc ça, c'est une condition obligatoire, bon, sauf les professions comme médecins, infirmières, qui sont des professions réglementées. Mais si on n'a pas une validation des acquis de l'expérience possible par la structuration des données, des diplômes, des certifications et par leur évaluation, on ne peut pas prétendre s'inscrire au cadre national. Donc, ce répertoire, il enregistre, donc, qui porte le cadre national, il enregistre des certifications professionnelles qui peuvent être délivrées par les ministères, les branches professionnelles ou par des organismes complètement privés, et maintenant pour 5 ans maximum. Donc, ce n'est pas parce qu'on a une orientation vers le marché de l'emploi que la formation de l'enseignement supérieur, les diplômes de l'enseignement supérieur ne font pas partie du cadre. Au contraire, tout l'objectif depuis des années du ministère de l'enseignement supérieur, c'est de faire coller le plus possible les certifications, les diplômes de l'enseignement supérieur à des perspectives du marché du travail, au recrutement des étudiants lorsqu'ils ont leur diplôme, tout en conservant le caractère académique et les prérequis pour faire partie du processus de Bologne, y compris en termes d'assurance qualité. Donc nous, on a un système qui est un système, ce qu'on appelle un système ascendant, c'est-à-dire ce n'est pas, il ne va pas y avoir un modèle préétabli pour, par exemple, la certification professionnelle d'un maçon. On peut avoir des certifications qui n'ont pas complètement le même périmètre, le même aspect. Le système, on peut nous proposer des modalités pour de nouvelles certifications. On a un système qui est aussi particulier, c'est-à-dire que il y a des pays, certains pays où vous avez un type, par exemple, un type d'organisme de formation ne peut délivrer qu'un type de certification. Nous, ce n'est pas le cas. On peut avoir des certifications qui sont issues de l'université. On a en France le CNAM qui est pas mal connu, mais le CNAM, par exemple, qui est un très gros organisme de formation, a à la fois des diplômes qui ont un grade de master, un grade de licence, mais qui produit aussi beaucoup de certifications professionnelles. Et chaque fois, chaque certification va être examinée pour être inscrite dans le cadre national. Cela veut dire que nous n'avons pas le système des awarding bodies. Une institution peut être excellente pour délivrer un type de certification ou des certifications dans un certain domaine. Ce n'est pas pour autant que l'ensemble de ces certifications sera considéré comme étant de qualité. Et ceci, que ce soit pour des certificateurs privés ou publics. C'est chaque certification qui fait l'objet d'un examen. Par contre, le système est ouvert à tout type de certificateurs qui remplissent les conditions posées par la loi. C'est-à-dire que nous avons dans notre cadre des diplômes qui sont des diplômes d'origine privée, des certifications, des diplômes qui sont d'origine internationale, des diplômes qui viennent de l'enseignement supérieur ou d'autres ministères. On n'est pas du tout dans un cadre qui est réservé au système académique. Dès le début, il y a eu d'autres types de certificateurs. Dès le début, par exemple, on a eu les chambres des métiers. On a eu l'artisanat qui a été présent. Par contre, il faut qu'il y ait des conditions posées par la loi. C'est-à-dire, ce sont des conditions qui protègent, qui tendent à protéger les utilisateurs finaux d'escroquerie, pour parler très schématiquement, ou qui permettent d'assurer une certaine pérennité des institutions qui délivrent les certifications. Donc on est plus dans ce registre-là, et on est aussi, bien sûr, dans des systèmes de prérequis qui doivent être remplis par tout le monde. Alors, on a eu, à la fin de l'année 2018, une loi qui a réformé la formation professionnelle, mais qui a eu aussi des impacts sur le système de formation tout court, qui a créé un nouveau cadre national. Ce cadre national permet de créer des passerelles entre les certifications d'autant plus facilement que maintenant, toutes les certifications qui sont inscrites au répertoire national doivent être constituées de blocs de compétences. Alors, on a en France une certaine homogénéisation des certifications pour qu'elles soient inscrites au répertoire national des certifications professionnelles, qui est la base de données officielle du cadre national français. Les certifications, elles doivent être définies par 3 référentiels, y compris pour l'enseignement supérieur, même si c'est plus compliqué pour l'enseignement supérieur. Mais il faut qu'il y ait un référentiel d'activité qui décrit des situations de travail et des activités exercées. Il faut qu'il y ait un référentiel, ce qu'on appelle un référentiel de compétences, qui identifie les compétences, y compris des compétences transversales, les langues, un certain nombre d'autres compétences transversales. Il faut aussi qu'on ait un référentiel d'évaluation qui définit les critères et les modalités d'évaluation des compétences. Et on est un système où une compétence, elle est acquise ou elle n'est pas acquise. C'est un peu blanc ou noir. Et le système d'évaluation doit pouvoir dire oui, la compétence est acquise. Alors, si on veut dire bien, bon, ça, pourquoi pas, c'est la liberté du certificateur, mais ce qui est important, c'est il l'a ou il ne l'a pas. Et ceci sur tous les types de compétences. Les compétences qu'on décrit en France comme une combinatoire de savoir, savoir-faire, aptitude. Donc, ces 2 premiers référentiels sont extrêmement importants pour pouvoir bien réfléchir à une validation des acquis de l'expérience. La VAE, celle qui est particulière au cadre français, qui est qui est un processus qui permet d'obtenir la même certification que celle obtenue par la voie initiale ou par la formation continue. On a d'autres types de validation. Mais celle-ci, depuis le début, depuis qu'elle existe, depuis 2002, elle est vraiment accrochée au système national français grâce à la description des certifications par 3 référentiels, activité, compétences et évaluation. Alors bien sûr, pour la validation des acquis de l'expérience, le référentiel, les modalités d'évaluation sont différentes. On est obligé de former les membres de jury. Il y a bien entendu, de par la loi, une obligation de présence des professionnels, parce que c'est le professionnel qui peut mieux comprendre ce que va exprimer le candidat lorsqu'il va dire dans le cadre de mes activités, voilà le type de compétences du diplôme que j'ai pu développer et voilà comment je le prouve avec mon dossier. Et contrairement aux autres modalités d'évaluation, là, le jury doit fournir des indications à la personne lorsqu'elle a des validations partielles. On peut dire, par exemple, pour un diplôme de l'enseignement supérieur, on voit tout à fait toute une partie du diplôme que vous remplissez. Par contre, est-ce que vous pourriez nous faire un mémoire? Comme ça, on sera sûr de la capacité que vous avez à faire de l'analyse, de la synthèse et de la rédaction sur une thématique, parce que c'est une des caractéristiques des diplômes académiques. Donc, le jury doit vraiment dire OK, il vous manque ça, faites ça. Ou alors, peut carrément dire, on n'a pas pu vous donner vraiment la certification, il faudrait que vous vous formiez carrément sur tel aspect de notre certification. Donc, comme je vous l'ai dit, il y a d'autres formes de validation d'acquis qui ne sont pas reliées au cadre national. Et en particulier, on est en train de travailler sur la formation sur les lieux de travail, sur les lieux en situation de travail, et on doit faire des analyses et des expérimentations pour relier cette nouvelle forme de formation à la VAE, mais ça, c'est quelque chose qui est encore en cours d'expérimentation. Donc, les référentiels dont je parlais maintenant sont accessibles par le grand public et qui peut aussi mieux voir sur quel type de certification il peut s'orienter. Sachant qu'en France, on a aussi, bien sûr, un système pour aider les personnes à choisir des certifications. Il y en a aussi un système d'accompagnement, mais ce serait un peu trop long pour que je vous le décrive aujourd'hui. Alors, maintenant, il ne veut plus travailler, il ne veut plus marcher. Maintenant, il est coincé.
Brigitte, tu m'entends?
Oui?
S'il te plaît, je voudrais te demander, tu es exactement à quel slide?
Fond, la 4. Et je voudrais passer à la 5, mais il est coincé.
Ok. Tu dois, parce que je voulais juste dire qu'au fait, ce n'est pas ta présentation qu'on est en train de voir.
Bah, vous êtes en train de voir quoi?
C'est Erika, notre collègue, qui est en train de faire du partage. Donc, chaque fois que tu changes de slide, il faudra dire un next slide. Comme ça,
Okay.
elle pourra changer correctement.
Désolée, mais je pensais que ça c'était en famille à fonctionner. Alors, page 4.
Tu es au slide 4.
Allez, on passe au 5.
Maintenant.
On passe au 5.
Tu vas passer au slide 5.
Voilà, on est parfait. Donc, une autre caractéristique de notre nouveau cadre, c'est qu'on a une obligation de découper les certifications en blocs de compétences qui contribuent à l'exercice autonome d'une activité professionnelle. Alors, je sais qu'il y a beaucoup de systèmes qui utilisent des crédits ou des certifications, ce qu'on appelle des certifications partielles. Hein, dans certains systèmes, on a ça. Ce n'est absolument pas le cas. En France, le bloc de compétences, c'est quelque chose qui permet d'exercer de manière autonome une partie d'une certification. Par exemple, lorsque on peut avoir des évolutions techniques, on pourra avoir le bloc de compétences qui évolue. C'est-à-dire que ça permet de conserver tout l'intérêt de la certification qui correspond à un métier ou à plusieurs métiers dans l'enseignement supérieur quelquefois, mais ça permet donc de ne pas revoir toute la certification uniquement parce qu'il y a une partie qui fonctionne. Donc, le but de ces blocs de compétences, c'est multiple, c'est améliorer la compréhension de ce qu'est la certification. C'est dans le cadre de la formation tout au long de la vie, acquérir petit à petit une qualification, en alternant éventuellement formation, validation des acquis de l'expérience, et aussi de permettre l'évolution de la certification. Ça permet aussi quelque chose qui est assez compliqué parce que généralement les certificateurs aiment beaucoup leur certification. Ça permet de créer des passerelles. Et la loi de 2018 a donné à la nouvelle commission qui est en charge de la certification professionnelle la possibilité de demander à des certificateurs qui ont des certifications proches, parce qu'on voit que les blocs de compétences sont proches, de créer des passerelles. Elle peut le demander une fois, elle peut le demander 3 fois. Si les certificateurs ne veulent pas coopérer, on peut retirer les certifications concernées du répertoire national, ce qui veut dire qu'on leur enlève le niveau du cadre national. 6, s'il vous plaît. Slide 6, please. C'est pas grave. Donc, pour améliorer la transparence des certifications, on a deux types d'accès au RNCP. Un qui est de droit, un qui est sur demande, mais avec des procédures qui chaque fois impliquent un dialogue entre l'État et les partenaires sociaux. Les partenaires sociaux, ça peut être les représentants d'un secteur, ça peut être dans un certain nombre de cas des représentants de ce qu'on appelle l'intersectoriel, mais enfin on a toujours des partenaires sociaux qui discutent de la certification, sinon elle ne peut pas avoir un niveau octroyé. Dans l'enregistrement de droit, c'est un arrêté ministériel donc, qui va donner le niveau à la certification après avis soit de commissions qui sont maintenant des commissions interministérielles où siègent les partenaires sociaux, soit pour l'enseignement supérieur, après l'avis de commission où on a, je l'ai mis au pluriel, je vais vous expliquer pourquoi, où on a des partenaires sociaux et des représentants des universités et des étudiants. Pour l'enseignement supérieur, on a plusieurs types de certifications, on a plusieurs types d'accréditation. Et chaque fois, on a un dialogue qui doit être institué entre toutes les parties prenantes. Pour l'enseignement supérieur, la nouvelle loi a introduit quelque chose d'original, c'est qu'il y a une commission qui va examiner la création du diplôme universitaire, le diplôme de l'université qui aura un grade. Cette commission doit discuter d'après un rapport qui a été élaboré par un binôme, un professeur d'université et un représentant du monde socio-économique. Et c'est vraiment pour les diplômes qui sont délivrés par les universités, quelque chose qui est devenu obligatoire. On a avant la signature de l'arrêté par le ministre de l'Enseignement supérieur. On a des procédures d'accréditation qui sont un tout petit peu différentes pour les titres d'ingénieur, qui chez nous ont le grade de master, et pour les diplômes des écoles de management, quand elles ont un grade ou un niveau qui est donné par le ministre de l'Enseignement supérieur. On a donc un autre type d'enregistrement qui est ce qu'on appelle sur demande. Et là, France Compétences joue le rôle de l'accréditation de la certification. Donc, on a une commission où siègent l'État, les régions et les partenaires sociaux, et qui est au sein de France Compétences. Mais le directeur général de France Compétences ne peut pas revenir sur les décisions de cette commission. La seule chose qu'il peut dire, c'est « je ne veux pas faire », je ne veux pas signer. Et là, dans ce cas-là, il se heurte, il faut quand même qu'il justifie pourquoi il ne pourrait pas signer et il pourrait y avoir des contentieux. Pour l'instant, ça n'est pas arrivé, il n'y a pas de raison que ça arrive. Mais on a donc cette commission qui est relativement indépendante. La ministre, quand la loi a été votée, s'est engagée à défendre à ce que cette commission soit indépendante. Donc, ces certifications, ensuite, vont avoir un niveau et ça va être signé par le directeur général de France Compétences, mais ce sera sur le site de France Compétences, mais bien sûr, comme le niveau est reconnu par l'État, ce sera publié au journal officiel de la République française. Slide 7, s'il vous plaît. Slide 7, please. Merci. Donc, si on en vient vraiment au cadre, et peut-être pour répondre à la question du collègue posée tout à l'heure, on a un processus en France, en tout cas, qui est un processus très lent. On a eu de 1972 à 2002 un cadre implicite qui était fondé sur la durée de la formation pour donner des niveaux. Et puis, de 2002 à 2018, on a eu un nouveau système hein, qui s'est mis en routine à utiliser les compétences et les acquis d'apprentissage, qui était aussi largement structuré par l'introduction par la loi de l'obligation de validation des acquis de l'expérience, pardon. Et on avait 5 niveaux. On avait en réalité des descripteurs qui étaient implicites, qui étaient vraiment, parce qu'on travaillait beaucoup sous forme de discussion et de consensus, donc les Français entre eux se comprenaient. C'était peut-être plus compliqué de le faire comprendre à l'extérieur, parce que ça reposait toujours sur un consensus social. Donc, ça avait été construit de manière empirique, ce n'était pas vraiment instauré dans les textes. Donc, les critères d'inscription, là aussi, faisaient l'objet d'un accord, mais n'étaient pas inscrits dans les textes. Donc, on a fini en 2019 par prendre un nouveau cadre qui est aussi profondément lié aux travaux qu'on a pu faire avec la Commission européenne, avec 8 niveaux, 3 descripteurs et des critères explicités par les textes. Mais le cadre national et la loi qui a créé le cadre national a bien marqué la différenciation forte que l'on fait en France entre la qualité de la formation et la qualité de la certification. L'enregistrement au cadre national permet de donner des messages, des signaux très forts sur la formation, mais il y a tout un processus d'assurance qualité dans la formation, enseignement supérieur, éducation ou formation professionnelle qui a été fixé par la loi, hein, et qui porte sur le fait que maintenant ce sont les institutions qui délivrent de la formation professionnelle à terme aussi pour l'enseignement supérieur qui devront faire l'objet d'un label de ce qu'on appelle en France le COFRAC, mais en réalité le COFRAC est relié à des organismes internationaux d'assurance qualité. Donc on a bien 2 parties très différentes, la qualité de la formation, la qualité de la certification. Next slide, please. La page 8. Merci. Donc, voilà, on a un cadre tout nouveau. Hein. On n'a pas encore eu la bénédiction de la Commission européenne pour avoir le référencement. On est comme les Irlandais, hein, mais nous, ce sera en février et pas en novembre qu'on va présenter tous nos critères de référencement à la Commission européenne. Donc, voilà, notre cadre. Il a donc 8 niveaux, sauf que la France est toujours la France et qu'on a neutralisé le niveau 1 parce qu'on n'était pas vraiment d'accord. Et vous allez voir dans nos descripteurs. Enfin, on n'était pas d'accord. On était d'accord entre nous pour dire que le marché de l'emploi, c'était un peu compliqué de mettre un niveau 1. Donc, on a fait autrement. Mais dans notre cadre national, donc, il y a vraiment des éléments constants. On différencie formation et certification. Compte tenu de l'orientation vraiment professionnelle, on a toujours été d'accord pour ne pas inscrire la formation générale de la maternelle au baccalauréat. Mais le baccalauréat, chez nous, c'est le premier grade universitaire et le bac maintenant à un niveau. On classe toujours dans notre cadre le niveau de qualification, mais aussi un domaine d'activité. Alors, selon une nomenclature qui est une nomenclature française, des spécialités de formation qui est un petit peu différente de la CIT ou de ISCED, parce que c'est vraiment lié au marché de l'emploi plus qu'à l'éducation. On a aussi la volonté de promouvoir une parité d'estime des diplômes et d'autres types de certifications professionnelles, mais ça a été vraiment depuis le début Je vous ai dit, on avait l'artisanat, on avait les chambres des métiers. Ça a toujours été quelque chose qui a été une constante de notre système de classement des certifications. Alors, grande nouveauté en 2019, tous les baccalauréats ont le niveau 4 parce que jusqu'à une époque, jusqu'en 2018, le bac général n'avait pas de niveau et le ministère de l'Éducation nationale a enfin convenu qu'en France, quand on disait avoir le niveau bac, ça voulait dire quelque chose pour le marché de l'emploi et donc a accepté de donner un niveau 4 au bac général. Page 8, s'il vous plaît. Par contre, on aura dans les fiches du répertoire national uniquement des fiches pour le bac professionnel. Page 9, s'il vous plaît. Slide 9, please. Voilà. Alors, je vais vous parler un tout petit peu de notre cadre, de notre système de descripteurs. Vous voyez qu'on a savoir, savoir-faire, et autonomie et responsabilité. Et chaque fois, on a une définition de ce qu'est ce descripteur du champ qui couvre. Et on a pris là aussi très très longtemps pour faire accepter des choses qui peuvent paraître tout à fait anodines quand on les lit. Par exemple sur les connaissances générales, c'est-à-dire qu'on s'est même posé la question en France dans un premier temps si on allait mettre là un descripteur qui serait autour du savoir. On avait fait un premier cadre sans le savoir. C'était un petit peu provocateur de notre part, hein, de la part de, à l'époque, la Commission nationale de la certification professionnelle. Ce qui fait que les ministères, les partenaires sociaux, tout le monde a un peu réagi. Et on a mis effectivement ce descripteur du savoir, mais en ayant eu des discussions très approfondies, par exemple entre l'enseignement supérieur, puisqu'on a fait un groupe de travail, on ne sait pas fonctionner autrement, entre les représentants de l'enseignement supérieur, les représentants des petits patrons, si je peux dire, sur lesquels il y a eu des explications, vraiment des explications, et on s'est mis d'accord sur ce que ça allait vouloir dire, y compris pour des certifications qui venaient directement du marché de l'emploi et qui n'avaient pas d'aspect vraiment académique. Donc, chaque fois, derrière les mots qui ont été utilisés, il y a eu un consensus qui a été créé pour que les gens comprennent la même chose. Pour le savoir-faire, ça a été, disons, un petit peu plus facile. Et pour la partie responsabilité et autonomie, là, on a eu effectivement assez vite, disons, le consensus s'est fait plus facilement. On a aussi voulu ajouter, par exemple, par rapport au cadre européen, ce qui était réaction face à l'aléa. Et organisation du travail. Donc, vous voyez, on a fait des descripteurs qui étaient vraiment adaptés à notre contexte. Alors, pour bien comprendre comment ça fonctionne, les descripteurs, ils doivent être lus à la fois de manière verticale et de manière horizontale. C'est-à-dire que c'est à deux entrées. C'est-à-dire que pour avoir le niveau, vous allez lire les connaissances générales, le savoir-faire et puis l'autonomie, mais vous allez aussi le contextualiser par rapport à ce qui est au-dessus et par rapport à ce qui est au-dessous. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne peut pas avoir comme ça quelque chose qui a un niveau. Le niveau, il doit être prouvé par rapport à ce qu'il y a en dessous. Alors, le doctorat, ça c'est plus compliqué par rapport à ce qu'il y a au-dessus, mais bien se situer dans une dynamique. Donc, je vous laisse regarder. On peut passer peut-être Voilà, merci. Alors, vous avez peut-être vu ou pas vu justement les descripteurs du niveau 1. En réalité, on a décidé que le niveau 1, ça correspondait à des savoirs de base. Ce qui correspond plus à quelque chose qui est du domaine de l'éducation ou vraiment des acquisitions de savoir de base pour accéder au marché de l'emploi. Et on n'a pas mis de descripteur parce que là, on est vraiment dans quelque chose qui était trop difficile pour nous, compte tenu de notre marché de l'emploi, hein, à expliciter. Donc, vous voyez, c'est les différentes progressions dans le cadre et dans les descripteurs. Et chaque fois, on a intégré quelque part, on a voulu intégrer le travail en équipe et la capacité de gestion. On peut avoir la diapositive suivante, s'il vous plaît? The next slide, please. Merci, voilà. Et donc, voilà, je vous les laisse lire. Et chaque fois, on a introduit, alors on a toujours travaillé dans la progression des descripteurs, sachant qu'on a commencé, vous voyez, à introduire quelque chose qui caractérise en France, par exemple, tout ce qui est grade de master, c'est le contexte multiculturel et l'international. Donc, chaque fois, on a essayé de balancer entre les différents types de certifications qui sont dans notre cadre. Nous, on ne veut pas parler de sous-système, ça ne fait pas partie de notre vocabulaire. Et justement, sur les descripteurs, on s'est longuement penché sur ce qui pouvait différencier, ce qui pouvait rapprocher, on a réussi à trouver, disons, cette partie qui faisait intervenir le multiculturel, la connaissance de ce qui se passait à côté au fur et à mesure qu'on montait dans les niveaux du cadre, et l'introduction du multiculturel et du multinational dans les derniers, niveaux de notre cadre.
Brigitte,
oui?
2 minutes.
Oui, on peut passer à la voilà. Donc, très rapidement, la France, donc on a des pays frontaliers, donc on travaille pas mal avec les pays voisins, ce qu'on appelle la grande région, regroupe la France, le Luxembourg, l'Allemagne, un petit peu de Belgique. Pour l'utilisation du cadre européen, comme on travaille beaucoup avec les branches professionnelles et les secteurs, on a eu dans notre système des branches qui ont des activités internationales, qui ont commencé elles-mêmes à travailler avant le nouveau cadre en fonction des descripteurs du cadre européen de certification. Et on a aussi utilisé les descripteurs, les nôtres, et puis ceux de la Commission européenne, du cadre européen, et d'autres pays, quand on a fait des réunions pour savoir si, par exemple, dans le cadre de l'artisanat, on avait des niveaux différents, mais ce que ça voulait dire. Ce qu'on a voulu dire, et ça a servi à vraiment établir la confiance entre les différents certificateurs, même si les niveaux n'étaient pas les mêmes. Et puis, donc, disons que les descripteurs, ça nous a quand même pas mal servi pour travailler à des projets internationaux. La dernière slide, s'il vous plaît. Alors, sur le Covid, on en parle beaucoup en France, mais je pense qu'il faut dire Covid et autres types d'événements similaires qui pourraient arriver. Alors, comme vous voyez, on a une différence entre la formation et la certification. On a eu de l'impact, bien sûr, sur la partie pédagogie, sur la formation. Mais ça n'a pas impacté la partie cadre. Par contre, il a fallu effectivement aussi modifier pour les certificateurs le système d'évaluation. Mais pour le cadre, en tant que cadre, ça a un impact limité parce que comme on est assez ouvert et qu'on a admis, par exemple, des certifications qui sont faites par notre Centre national d'enseignement à distance, on peut avoir de l'évaluation à distance. Le cadre ne l'interdit pas. Par contre, on s'est aperçu qu'il faudrait vraiment qu'on mette peut-être en place une doctrine commune sur l'évaluation à distance. Par contre, on pense que, compte tenu de la manière dont on enregistre sur demande, mais je n'avais pas le temps de vous l'expliquer dans le détail, on fait des analyses statistiques de cohorte des titulaires de la certification, parce que l'enregistrement sur demande, c'est celui qui présente la demande qui a pris le risque économique et qui a fait, sa certification, qui a certifié des gens, et ensuite, il vient demander, avec des preuves à l'appui, le niveau. Alors là, on risque d'avoir effectivement des problèmes compte tenu du chômage qui a sûrement arrivé. Et là, on sera amené effectivement peut-être à travailler différemment sur l'analyse des cohortes pour voir leur insertion dans l'emploi qui sera certainement plus lente, peut-être à des niveaux à des niveaux qui ne correspondent pas vraiment à des niveaux de qualification qu'il y aurait eu s'il y avait eu un fonctionnement normal de l'économie. Donc ça, pour ça, c'est devant nous. Voilà, dernière slide. Je vous remercie beaucoup de votre écoute et je suis prête à répondre à vos questions. Merci.
Shall we give a reaction of applaudissement to Brigitte? Est-ce qu'on va applaudir Brigitte? Merci beaucoup, Brigitte. Tu as partagé avec nous beaucoup de manière très détaillée et approfondie l'évolution de votre cadre et tant de particularités qui caractérisent le cadre français. Merci beaucoup. Compte tenu de notre horaire, de notre temps, je voudrais alors qu'on passe directement à la troisième session qui sera faite en portugais et qui sera dédiée donc au cadre national de certificação du Portugal. Vamos ter agora o quadro nacional de qualificações de Portugal. A Teresa Duarte pode já começar a preparar a sua apresentação. Teresa? Ok, very good. Excellent. Teresa, vamos tentar manter os não mais de 30 minutos por causa do tempo.
Ok.
Ok, obrigada, sim.
Sim. Bom, muito boa tarde a todos. É um prazer estar aqui para partilhar convosco a experiência relativa ao quadro nacional de qualificações e aos instrumentos criados no âmbito do Sistema Nacional de Qualificações. Eu gostaria, portanto, os primeiros slides têm muito a ver com o enquadramento que é feito relativamente ao quadro nacional de qualificações. Portanto, o quadro nacional de qualificações é um quadro que foi criado no âmbito da reforma do Sistema de Educação e Formação em 2007 e surge num contexto em que aquilo que se pretendia, e ainda hoje se pretende, é aumentar os níveis de qualificação e estabelecer o nível secundário de ensino como o patamar mínimo de qualificação, ou seja, os 12 anos de escolaridade. Bom, e entre os vários objetivos que surgiram no âmbito dessa legislação, eu vou aqui destacar os que aqui estão neste slide, e o primeiro tem a ver com o reforço da integração entre a formação no sistema educativo e formação e o mercado de trabalho. Portanto, Portugal, a partir desta altura, passou a priorizar tudo o que tem a ver com as modalidades de educação e formação de dupla certificação, ou seja, alguém que sai do sistema de ensino e formação com 2 certificados, um certificado escolar e, ao mesmo tempo, um certificado profissional. E é este princípio que em Portugal se chama de dupla certificação. Por outro lado, também com o Sistema Nacional de Qualificações, passou-se a valorizar muito mais tudo o que tem a ver com a validação das aprendizagens não formais e informais, que em Portugal se chama RVCC, ou seja, um processo de reconhecimento, validação e certificação de competências. Outro dos objetivos do Sistema Nacional de Qualificações foi precisamente promover uma flexibilidade na educação e formação, e para isso criaram-se aquilo que foi apelidado como UFCDs, ou seja, Unidades de Formação de Curta Duração, que são módulos com a duração de 25 ou 50 horas, que permitem que exista uma certificação independente e uma maior autonomização e flexibilidade. Para além disso, o outro objetivo tem a ver com o reforço da permeabilidade entre as vias de educação geral, tanto académicas, e as vias mais profissionalizantes, para além de se pretender incrementar e reforçar muitíssimo a ligação entre o lado da oferta e o lado da procura. Por último, o último objetivo a destacar como bastante importante com a criação do Sistema Nacional foi que o que se pretendia era criar uma legibilidade e comparabilidade das qualificações nacionais. Bom, claro que no âmbito deste Sistema Nacional de Qualificações tinham que ser criados estruturas e instrumentos para suportar este sistema. E aqui embaixo o que encontram com um verde muito clarinho corresponde a 2007, portanto, quando foi criado o Sistema Nacional de Qualificações, e um verde intermédio diz respeito aos instrumentos e estruturas que existiam já em 2007 e que se mantiveram e mantêm hoje, sobretudo com uma alteração que existiu em 2017, que foi a primeira alteração ao Sistema Nacional de Qualificações. Portanto, se olharem aqui para o lado dos instrumentos, vão encontrar no segundo quadrado, no terceiro quadrado, o Quadro Nacional de Qualificações, ou seja, foi nesta altura que foi criado o Quadro Nacional de Qualificações, a par com um instrumento que depois vamos ver mais à frente, que é o Catálogo Nacional de Qualificações, e do lado das estruturas encontramos nessa altura a criação dos centros, na altura chamavam-se Centros Novas Oportunidades, que no fundo são portas de entrada para a formação ao longo da vida e onde decorrem os processos de validação de competências, e encontramos ainda a rede de operadores de formação e os conselhos setoriais para a qualificação, que também vou só muito brevemente falar sobre eles. Em 2017, para dar resposta precisamente aos objetivos que referi anteriormente, foi criado o Sistema de Antecipação de Necessidades de Qualificações, precisamente para haver um maior ajustamento entre a oferta e a procura de qualificações, e foi também criado um Sistema Nacional de Créditos para o ensino e formação profissional, portanto só a nível não superior, visto que a nível superior já existiam os ECTS. Em 2017, portanto, houve uma alteração em termos dos centros ligados à formação ao longo da vida, passaram-se a chamar Centros Qualifiquem, entre outras características, e houve um investimento ao nível da garantia de qualidade ligada ao ECAVET. Bom, então, focando agora mais especificamente sobre o Quadro Nacional de Qualificações, este quadro foi criado e foi proposto por 3 ministérios, portanto o Ministério da Educação, o Ministério do Trabalho e Solidariedade Social e o Ministério da Ciência, Tecnologia e Ensino Superior. Esta proposta foi discutida no Conselho Nacional de Formação Profissional e durante um mês, portanto entre o mês de agosto e o mês de setembro, este quadro, tal como os restantes instrumentos do Sistema Nacional de Qualificações, tiveram lugar houve uma consulta pública. Analisados os resultados dessa consulta pública, o quadro acabou por ser criado efetivamente em dezembro de 2007, baseado nos princípios do Quadro Europeu de Qualificações, foi regulamentado numa portaria em julho de 2009 e entrou em vigor no dia 1 de outubro de 2010. Quanto aos principais objetivos do quadro, portanto, aquilo que se pretendia era criar um quadro que fosse compreensivo, ou seja, que integrasse as qualificações obtidas no contexto de diferentes subsistemas de educação e formação. quer fosse educação, formação profissional ou ensino superior. Também aquilo que se pretendia era melhorar a legibilidade, a transparência e a comparabilidade das qualificações. Aquilo que existia até então era um quadro implícito e aquilo que passou a existir com o quadro nacional de qualificações foi uma explicitação, uma maior transparência dos níveis das qualificações. Também se pretendia melhorar o acesso à progressão e a qualidade das qualificações nacionais, definir resultados de aprendizagem para cada nível de qualificação e ainda assegurar que houvesse um alinhamento com o quadro europeu de qualificações. Isto é, principais, e agora estes objetivos vão se refletir nas principais características que tem o quadro nacional português. Portanto, consideramos que o quadro é um quadro abrangente, valorizador, integrador e que está articulado com o quadro europeu. Isto é abrangente precisamente por aquilo que referi há pouco. Existe num único quadro vários subsistemas de educação e formação. Também, num único quadro, é possível aceder à qualificação por diferentes vias, não unicamente por percursos de educação e formação, mas também pela validação das aprendizagens não formais e informais, portanto, pelo RVCC, quer seja ela uma validação escolar, quer seja uma validação profissional. É um quadro que valoriza a dupla certificação, tal como referi há pouco, a questão de obter-se uma qualificação onde se tem na mão uma certificação escolar, mas também uma certificação profissional, e também se valoriza o reconhecimento e validação de competências. É um quadro integrador, porque dentro de um mesmo nível existem diferentes modalidades. Por exemplo, ao nível do secundário, estão aí contempladas, e aqui no nível 4, que já vamos ver a seguir, encontram-se uma modalidade que se chama cursos profissionais, mas também se encontra uma modalidade que são os cursos de aprendizagem ou os cursos de educação e formação de adultos. É ainda integrador, e todos sabemos a quantidade enorme de conceitos relacionados com competência, na medida em que Portugal considerou um conceito holístico de competência. Portanto, para Portugal, o conceito de competência não é mais do que a mobilização dos conhecimentos, aptidões e atitudes num dado contexto. A última característica tem a ver, no fundo, com a articulação com o quadro europeu. Tal como o quadro europeu, o quadro nacional tem 8 níveis de qualificação. Os descritores de nível são muito semelhantes ao quadro europeu e estão definidos em termos de resultados de aprendizagem e, portanto, estes resultados de aprendizagem estão descritos para cada nível de qualificação. O próximo slide mostra-nos, em termos muito sucintos, o quadro nacional, que, como vos disse, tem 8 níveis. Do nível 1 ao nível 5 diz respeito a níveis ao nível do não superior, educação e formação não superior, enquanto que os níveis 6 a 8 estão reservados para o ensino superior. Portanto, em qualquer um dos níveis, portanto, do nível 1 ao nível 4, é possível obter a qualificação através da RVCC, portanto, validação das aprendizagens não formais e informais, e no nível 6 a 8 também é possível haver, portanto no 8 não, mas no nível 6, teoricamente sim, mas na prática é difícil, mas no nível 6 e 7 é possível também haver validação das aprendizagens no ensino superior. Portanto, o nível 1 corresponde ao segundo ciclo do ensino básico, isto é, 6 anos de escolaridade. O nível 2 corresponde ao terceiro ciclo, que são 9 anos de escolaridade. O nível 3 e 4 correspondem a 12 anos de escolaridade e aqui foi uma decisão política que foi valorizar a dupla certificação, ou seja, alguém que obtém o 12º ano apenas pela via académica, ou seja, tendo uma certificação escolar, tem um nível inferior a quem obtém esse mesmo 12º ano mas obtendo a certificação escolar e a certificação profissional. O nível 5 é um nível direcionado para as qualificações pós-secundárias não superior, apesar de permitir créditos para prosseguimento de estudos no ensino superior. Atualmente só existe uma oferta de nível 5, que são os cursos de especialização tecnológica, os CETs, que têm a duração entre 1 ano a 1 ano e meio, e portanto posicionam-se aqui no nível 5. Portanto, o nível 6 é a licenciatura, nível 7 mestrado e o nível 8 o doutoramento. Portanto, como podem imaginar, e quem está envolvido precisamente na criação de quadros nacionais e na sua implementação, este percurso, esta criação e depois a implementação não foi isenta de desafios. Aqui estão elencados alguns desses desafios. Um deles teve precisamente a ver com a necessidade de ajustar os descritores que já eram utilizados no quadro de qualificações implícito, agora ajustar esses mesmos descritores aos descritores utilizados no quadro nacional de qualificações, portanto não foi uma tarefa muito fácil. Outro dos desafios teve a ver com a utilização de resultados de aprendizagem para definir níveis de qualificação. Isto porque existem diferentes abordagens, existiam e ainda existem, apesar de cada vez este facto de estar a ser mais debatido, mas existem ainda diferentes abordagens, conceitos e práticas, e portanto foi também um desafio tentar esta harmonização. O uso do conceito de atitude, que no fundo que integra a autonomia e responsabilidade em vez de competência, também foi algo que foi muito discutido na altura, se deveríamos fazer ou se deveríamos utilizar a competência tal como na altura a recomendação do quadro europeu contemplava. Com a implementação e com a criação e depois a implementação do quadro, também houve necessidade de comunicar e divulgar o mais possível o quadro nacional, e ainda o fazemos hoje em dia. E, portanto, o aspecto que acabou por levar a maior discussão, ou a maior desconforto, se quiserem, foi precisamente a diferenciação entre o nível 3 e o nível 4, porque ambos, no final, o indivíduo tem 12 anos de escolaridade, mas há esta diferenciação de níveis devido à dupla certificação. Bom, algumas das soluções que foram encontradas, uma delas teve a ver com a necessidade de criar uma metodologia de concessão de qualificações baseada em resultados de aprendizagem. Esta metodologia existe desde 2015 e agora em 2020 estamos precisamente a reestruturá-la, estamos a ajustá-la face a algumas alterações que quisemos introduzir. Houve também a necessidade de criar um guia de apoio ao utilizador para tornar os descritores de nível menos áridos e, portanto, mais explícitos e legíveis. E para que os vários prestadores do sistema de educação e informação também o pudessem utilizar. Em termos de atividades de comunicação e divulgação, houve, logo nos anos seguintes e ainda hoje, um grande investimento com a criação de folhetos, de conferências, de workshops, precisamente para divulgar e para disseminar em que é que consiste o quadro nacional e o quadro europeu de qualificações. Portanto, hoje em dia, passados 10 anos, quase 10 anos, sobre o quadro nacional de qualificações, nós temos um quadro legal que está em vigor, foram classificadas as qualificações por níveis e foram implementados os dispositivos de garantia de qualidade. Portanto, eu tinha pensado mostrar-vos um site que está aqui, neste momento está alojado no Europass, que compara os níveis de qualificação por país, portanto, relativamente aos países europeus. Agora, por economia de tempo, não o vou fazer, mas penso que é interessante, visto que fica disponível na apresentação, que depois o possam fazer e comparar os níveis de qualificação de diferentes países, tendo como referência o quadro europeu de qualificações. Em que áreas é que até agora o quadro fez mais diferença, digamos assim? Por um lado, ao nível da visibilidade. Portanto, hoje em dia, nós temos, Portugal tem muitos certificados e diplomas, onde já está mencionado o nível do quadro nacional de qualificações. Isto em termos dos níveis não superiores. Ainda em termos não superiores, os certificados e diplomas, e muitos deles já incluem os níveis do quadro nacional de qualificações e os níveis do quadro europeu de qualificações. Para além disso, a base de dados de educação e formação, que é, em termos de não superior, que é o catálogo nacional de qualificações, já tem expresso os níveis do quadro nacional e do quadro europeu. E o acesso ao apoio financeiro e aos estágios profissionais também leva em consideração o quadro. Em termos de legibilidade, hoje em dia os descritores de nível são mais claros e acessíveis aos utilizadores e as próprias aprendizagens não formais e informais também são muito mais legíveis. Bom, o quadro também faz diferença nitidamente em termos da transparência. Portanto, utilizam-se cada vez mais resultados de aprendizagem para descrever e classificar as qualificações. Os descritores de nível são usados para apoiar a revisão e a renovação das qualificações, portanto, cada vez que se, obviamente, desenha uma qualificação, tem-se como referência os descritores do quadro, e com a utilização não unicamente dos saberes e dos saberes fazeres, ou dos conhecimentos e das aptidões, mas com a introdução de um terceiro domínio, que são as atitudes, acabou por se valorizar as soft skills, o que foi um aspecto muito importante em termos de transparência. Em termos de envolvimento, portanto, desde o início que foi muito importante o envolvimento de diferentes stakeholders, desde logo no processo de referenciação, foi em 2011, no caso português. Também desde 2007, quando foram criados os conselhos setoriais para a qualificação, estes conselhos acabam por ter uma intervenção muito importante, porque nenhuma qualificação é integrada no Sistema Nacional de Qualificações e no quadro sem passar por um setor de qualificações, os conselhos setoriais, desculpem. E em termos de envolvimento, também existe o envolvimento de diferentes stakeholders na avaliação das aprendizagens adquiridas em ambientes não formais e informais. Bom, pela enorme ligação ao quadro nacional de qualificações, queria só dar-vos aqui uma breve passagem pelo catálogo nacional de qualificações, que no fundo é um instrumento de gestão estratégica das qualificações nacionais de dupla certificação ao nível não superior, e na medida em que facilita o acesso à qualificação, promovendo a flexibilidade na obtenção das qualificações. Bom, portanto, o catálogo nacional, eu já vos vou mostrar muito rapidamente, o catálogo nacional de qualificações integra referenciais que são utilizados na formação profissional inicial, na formação profissional contínua e no RVCC. É muito importante destacar isto, os referenciais de reconhecimento e validação de competências são equivalentes aos referenciais de formação utilizados na educação formal, portanto não existe nenhuma diferença, nem existe diferença em termos de atribuição de nível, nem nos certificados. O catálogo integra, portanto, tal como já tinha referido anteriormente, módulos ou UFCDs com 25 e 50 horas, que podem ser avaliados, certificados e capitalizados de forma autónoma e podem ser transferidos entre percursos de qualificação. Ou seja, aquilo que o catálogo tem é a possibilidade de um indivíduo fazer um percurso de formação, obter uma qualificação completa, ou então fazer unicamente uma UFCD e ir a pouco e pouco completando, fazendo módulos, para conseguir alcançar uma qualificação. E, portanto, o catálogo também promove e assegura essa ligação ao quadro europeu de qualificações. Portanto, atualmente o catálogo inclui 388 qualificações em 47 áreas de educação e formação. Queria só mostrar muito rapidamente, aqui se a internet ajudar, a imagem do catálogo e como é que ele é constituído. Vamos ver, senão solicitava para quem tem interesse verificar mais tarde esta ligação. Pelos vistos, não está a ajudar. Bom, se calhar vou passar à frente. É pena, mas é preferível. Vou voltar. Vamos ver. Desculpem este inconveniente, mas a ligação caiu com a tentativa de abrir o catálogo nacional de qualificações.
Consegue partilhar o screen de novo?
É isso, estou a tentar aqui. Estou a tentar.
Teresa, do you want me to share the presentation?
Maybe. Let me try again, please.
Yes.
Let me try. Yes, I think it's better. Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, please.
It's the slide 14, please. Well, maybe I can speak to have more time. Portanto, vou continuar. Queria-vos falar apenas, portanto, apesar de já o ter feito muito rapidamente, sobre, sobre os conselhos setoriais para a qualificação. Portanto, funcionam como plataformas de atualização do catálogo nacional. No fundo, o grande objetivo é reunir os dois mundos, o mundo da educação e o mundo do trabalho. E, portanto, junta diferentes stakeholders de ambos os mundos e existe um conselho setorial para cada área de educação e formação, grosso modo. Portanto, quais é que são os representantes que se encontram nestes conselhos? Portanto, são conselhos que são coordenados pela Agência Nacional para a Qualificação e o Ensino Profissional, mas têm a participação de associações patronais, sindicais, ministérios, entidades formadoras, peritos independentes, empresas de referência, portanto, num total de 10 elementos que são chamados a intervir à medida que as qualificações e dependendo do tipo de qualificações. Uma coisa é certa, não há nenhuma qualificação que seja integrada no catálogo e no quadro sem que tenha passado pelos conselhos setoriais para a qualificação. Next slide, please. Thank you. Bom, falar-vos um pouco então do RVCC e, portanto, que é, tal como vos falei, está muito presente no quadro nacional, nos vários níveis. Portanto, o sistema de validação de aprendizagens foi criado no ano 2000 e nós apelida-se RVCC. Este sistema, apesar de não se chamar RVCC, também é possível, portanto, a validação também é possível no ensino superior. A legislação portuguesa permite, a nível do ensino superior, o acesso de adultos com 24 anos ou mais que não possuem o ensino secundário e, portanto, as instituições de ensino superior têm autonomia para desenvolver os seus procedimentos. Após nos momentos iniciais, após ser permitido praticamente obter uma qualificação só através de validação, depois de alguns casos mais complicados, então a partir não há muitos anos, a validação só é possível para quem obtém 1/3 do número total de ECTS de 1 grau. Next, please. Bom, O RVCC é desenvolvido, e aqui é uma particularidade portuguesa, praticamente, pelo grande volume, é desenvolvido por uma rede de centros de validação, que neste momento se chamam Centros Qualifica, e destina-se a adultos com idade igual ou superior a 18 anos que não possuem o ensino secundário, o ensino básico, ou seja, o 4º, 6º ou 9º ano, ou o ensino secundário, 12º ano. Quem tem entre 18 e 23 anos tem de ter pelo menos 3 anos de experiência profissional certificada para ser elegível no processo de reconhecimento de competências. Este sistema foi cofinanciado pelo Fundo Social Europeu e pelo Orçamento de Estado e é um processo gratuito para os indivíduos e é direcionado para todos os adultos que vivem em Portugal. Os centros Qualifica, next please. It's possible to have the next slide, please. Ok, thank you. Os centros Qualifica existe um conjunto de fases para os processos de reconhecimento e avaliação de competências. Estes fornecem, portanto, quem entra num centro pode obter informação, orientação e encaminhamento, sobretudo dos adultos, mas excepcionalmente também este processo pode ser feito para jovens, sobretudo jovens de NEET, portanto, que não estão na escola, nem estão no emprego, e, portanto, há essa abertura pelos centros Qualifica. Os centros permitem o reconhecimento quer escolar, quer profissional, portanto, níveis 1 a 4 do Quadro Nacional de Qualificações. Please, next slide. E este é o processo, não vou falar sobre ele em concreto, mas, ou com pormenor, mas portanto é este o procedimento. Há uma primeira fase da inscrição, depois faz-se um diagnóstico de competências, a seguir há um processo de orientação e depois o adulto é encaminhado, quer seja para outras ofertas de formação ou educação, quer seja para um processo de reconhecimento e validação de competências. Há poucos anos que este processo de reconhecimento e validação inclui no mínimo 50 horas de formação. Feito este reconhecimento, ou passada esta etapa, o adulto pode obter uma certificação completa ou pode obter uma certificação parcial e, nesse caso, é construído com ele um plano de qualificação pessoal que vai implicar a frequência de formação e nomeadamente do FCDs. Next, please. Só para vos mostrar agora este último slide, que é o seguinte, que diz respeito ao RVCC, portanto nós temos 2 referenciais de competência-chave em nível escolar, um para o básico, que tem estas áreas de competência, que são linguagem e comunicação, matemática para a vida, cidadania e empregabilidade e as TIC, e temos também um referencial para o nível secundário, com estas 3 áreas, e ainda os referenciais da RVCC profissional, que estão inseridos no Catálogo Nacional de Qualificações. Portanto, foi realmente uma pena não vos conseguir mostrar, mas facilmente, indo ao catálogo, os vão encontrar. Portanto, neste momento existem 161 referenciais de qualificações profissionais. Queria apenas terminar, next please, para vos falar, que penso que já devo ter muito poucos minutos, sobre, next please, sobre o Quadro Nacional de Qualificações e o Covid. Portanto, este é um assunto que infelizmente nos interessa a todos, que estamos todos a viver. Aquilo que coloquei aqui nos slides, depois podem ver com mais atenção, tem a ver precisamente qual é que foi, a partir de março, qual é que foi a reação que o governo português teve perante esta circunstância. Portanto, next please, next slide please. Ok, thank you. Portanto, a partir de 16 de março, todas as escolas fecharam em Portugal e, no entanto, pretendeu-se continuar a aprendizagem e o ensino ao longo deste período. E, portanto, quer os professores, quer os alunos foram incentivados a aproveitar os recursos que já existiam, mas também recorrer a plataformas digitais. Eu, quando vos disse que todas as escolas fecharam, não é exatamente verdade. Houve uma escola por território desculpa, houve uma escola por território que ficou sempre aberta, no sentido de acolher alunos com maiores vulnerabilidades e também alunos cujos pais estivessem em posições consideradas como serviços essenciais. Nesta altura, para além do acesso digital, foi também retomado um projeto que tinha existido entre meados dos anos 60 e meados dos anos 80, grosso modo, em Portugal, que era a telescola. No fundo, foi retomada uma emissão pública e gratuita de televisão para conseguir precisamente tentar colmatar as grandes desigualdades sociais que acabaram por se verificar com o encerramento das escolas. Esta telescola foi um tal sucesso, agora não se chama telescola, mas habitualmente é assim que o chamamos, que foi ontem anunciado pelo governo português que para o ano letivo que começa na próxima semana, a telescola também não abrange apenas o ensino básico, mas vai também passar a abranger o ensino secundário. E, portanto, os alunos vão ter também acesso a essa ferramenta, precisamente para diminuir a desigualdade. Bom, em termos da educação e formação profissional, foram implementadas algumas orientações pelo Ministério da Educação, no que se refere às escolas profissionais, orientações essas que incidiram sobre a frequência, os planos de formação, a avaliação, os exames finais e a formação em contexto de trabalho. Uma decisão que foi tomada teve a ver com o ensino básico e, portanto, todos os exames que estavam previstos para o ensino básico foram cancelados, ficaram apenas os exames que diziam respeito aos alunos que no 11º e no 12º ano têm que ter realização de exames obrigatórios para depois aceder ao ensino superior. Relativamente aos centros Qualifica, também no fundo, não se parou a atividade, tentou-se que todas as atividades inerentes, quer à inscrição, quer à orientação e até mesmo à realização de júris, que continuassem utilizando ferramentas online, nomeadamente videoconferência, sempre que isso fosse possível. Bom, uma coisa no fundo, e eu já estou mesmo a terminar, uma coisa foi certa relativamente ao Covid. A pandemia agravou, já existem alguns estudos por isso, agravou nitidamente as desigualdades sociais, que já constituíam um grande desafio para o sistema educativo. E, portanto, aquilo que se está a fazer é tentar ao máximo, desde que a pandemia assim o permita, é tentar ao máximo que as escolas continuem abertas e só em segundo plano, então, encerrar as escolas. Muito obrigada pela vossa atenção e estou disponível para as vossas questões.
Muito obrigada, Teresa. Let us give also a reaction to Teresa for this very comprehensive presentation.
Obrigada.
Teresa, since time is already quite advanced, we will not stop now for questions on your presentation. But participants, of course, have the opportunity to write questions. So thank you very much. Now let us move to the next session. We will have in which we will have then our discussant, who is Joe Samuels. He has prepared an analysis, a brief presentation with a number of issues he identified from studying these presentations of today. Plus, he added a number of quite fundamental mega trends that have to be taken into account by, let's say, national qualifications frameworks and systems in any case. So I will try to share Joe's presentation. It is in, I think, do you see the presentation? Yes? Is the presentation visible? Policy learning?
Yes, we can see it.
Very good.
Yeah, well, yes, it is visible, yes.
Thank you very much. Joe, you will just tell me, please, when I need to change, okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Eduarda. I think we should say thank you to the 3 presenters, in fact, the 4 presenters, including yourself, Eduarda, for giving us so much and such a rich experience this afternoon that maybe we should give them a round of applause. Yeah, so so what I want to firstly talk about is to say that the reason why I thought that I needed to speak about policy learning in pursuit of developing the ACQF is that we are not in the business of policy borrowing, but we want to listen to all the experiences across the world and try to see what are the best for the continent of Africa to take us forward. So that is why, you know, my title is policy learning and not policy borrowing. The second thing I want to touch on briefly is the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. How are we affected? And in fact, also to just take a few minutes to remember what this means for those people who have been infected and people who have passed away with this particular endemic. Then secondly, what can we learn from the current and the past? So the presentations made by Eduarda, by Brigitte, by Erica, and by Robin. And then, you know, one of the key questions then is also, what are the lessons and implications for the future of the ACQF? Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So if one then takes the presentations of today, I think that Eduarda gave us a very good overview of the ACQF project, where it is at the moment, as well as the role and the function, in fact, of the peer learning webinars, you know, that we have seen. And what are the key learnings from that? I think, you know, it gave us a very good grounding, as it were. Looking at the presentation that was made by Frans, I must say, I think the point also that Eduarda made is that very often, you know, in the English-speaking parts of the African continent, you know, we're not enriched by what is happening in Portuguese-speaking countries and in French-speaking countries. And so I think that the learning today has been just tremendous, as it were. So it was good to look at, to be explained, the new law, the professional qualifications, the fact that there are 2 national registers, one that allocates levels and the other one not, the long tradition of validation of non-formal learning. In fact, I think that the Mauritians learned a little bit from the French system because they are close to the Union, which is close to them. And I was in Mauritius, you know, when, you know, they were going through the system and there was a person there, you know, from, from the island. Quite clearly, it is an 8-level framework. And I must say, I find it very, very interesting to have a look and listen to the level descriptors, you know, that was clearly outlined, you know, in the presentation. So thank you so much for that. I think for me, the Portuguese presentation was indeed refreshing because very often people don't speak about challenges up front. You know, they tell you about all the wonderful things that happen without saying these are the key challenges that we are confronted with. Again, one can see the system that has been outlined, and thank you very much for those links, because it will allow us to actually have a look, you know, after the after this particular session. I really enjoyed, you know, the issues raised around in the level descriptors, whether it should be competence and attitude, because I think that that is a very interesting idea that we will have to grapple with. So in fact, it was very good to see, you know, that, you know, those issues have been raised. I also think that the system in place with regard to the validation of qualifications are quite an important one. And it clearly seems to me that there's a system, you know, that is working across the country there. Mauritius, I think Robin, you know, was saying right up front that the Mauritian system that started in 2003 and it is 17 years young, was taking it very slowly and trying to build consensus. And I think that is such an important part of what has happened to qualification frameworks that has been around for a long time. The key question for me when I was looking at that is, do we still have the time? Do we have 17 years to build, you know, the African continental qualifications framework? And so we would have to think a little bit about how long it takes, you know, as we go. I think they've made very good progress. They've got all the elements in place for qualifications framework, registration, quality assurance, sectoral qualifications. And then I think the process around alignment, you know, that Robin explained is there. And I think the other thing that is quite interesting with regard to Mauritius, they are not only part, you know, of this process of the African continental qualifications framework, but they are part of the SADC qualifications framework and of course the transnational qualifications framework. And so I think we can learn quite a lot from them in terms of alignment, referencing and so on, and those wonderful terms that we are using. Now, Robin doesn't reflect too much about COVID, and I want to again say thank you to the colleagues from Mozambique that spoke about the widened inequality that the pandemic has brought about. I do think that we must actually reflect very seriously on this pandemic and what it means for national qualifications framework. I want to congratulate, in fact, Mauritius, because they have dealt with the pandemic in a very good way. They only have 356 infections and 10 people passed away. And I think one, you know, one person who passes away is one too many, as it were. But I think they have done remarkably well in Mauritius. Can we just move to the next slide, please? Now, what I did as preparation was I had a look at what this means for what the pandemic means in terms of numbers for the continent, and where it is that one can find, you know, the outbreaks of COVID and the pandemic throughout the continent. So 47 countries affected, more than 1 million people have been infected by the virus, and there's 23,000 deaths. Now, very often when one looks at statistics, you just look at the numbers. And people compare, you know, we're not doing too badly in terms of other countries and so on. But for each person who has passed away, it means it's a family member that passed away. In fact, it is a father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, children, and so on. And I do think what the pandemic has done is to bring out the best in people so that we can pledge solidarity with those who passed away and those who were affected. And we also know that there are people that are called long haulers, which are suffering from effects way beyond when they have come out of hospital, for example. The next slide, please. A number of people have reflected on what has the pandemic taught us. So we are all equal as humans. We are all connected, and our health is very precious and we neglected it. Some of the other things I think that is quite important is that we can choose to cooperate with each other, or we can simply try to go it alone. And we know that it doesn't work like that. By working together, we can find solutions to the problem. Now, pandemics have also brought out the worst and the best in people. I do think that we would have to rethink as humans the way that our relationship is with animals, because the predictions are that there will be more pandemics coming, and unless we make a change in that relationship, it is very important. The pandemic also taught us that who's important in life. And we have seen that it's not highly paid footballers that can save us, but it's the lowly paid essential workers and the healthcare workers that we turn to, you know, in these kind of disastrous moments that we are in. So all of this has got, for me, an implication for when we think about national qualification frameworks and what do we want to see the future to be. Next slide, please. So if we look at national qualification frameworks and, you know, and everyone who made a presentation today. So what are the implications of COVID-19, particularly when it comes to the economic downturn for NQFs and ACQFs? I know that in a number of countries, for example, South Africa is a key example where our economy has gone down with something like 51% in the second quarter. It means for this year that, you know, our economy would have gone down by 8% for the year. That has got huge implications for budgets. And so people might be faced with staff, cuts in staff, cuts in budgets, and also cuts in programs and so on. So we need to think a little bit about that. And what does it mean for us trying to build the NQFs and the AQF ACQF? Then the second point, how can NQFs and ACQF address issues of inequality that I think was highlighted by Portugal, unemployment and poverty? Those are all key things within the African continent. Often I hear people speak about building back. Now, when you're building back, you are saying that somehow that was the ideal situation. But if part and parcel and embedded in your system is deep inequality, high unemployment and poverty, you cannot talk about building back. It's about making fundamental changes to our economic situation and in fact to our learning and recognition situation that we find. Thirdly, what are the implications of climate change for the future of NQFs and the ACQF? Now, some people argue that if we think that the pandemic is bad, that climate change will be worse. And therefore we need to make sure that when we think about this, that we need to include that kind of thinking about the future. Then the other point is, so what are the implications of the technological change for NQFs and ACQF? Here for me, you know, we're in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. And as I listen to the processes, I mean, the processes that people are following to recognize qualifications are tedious. And so we would have to be challenged as NQFs and thinking about the ACQF about how do we speed up these processes? How do we make sure that the turnaround times are improved and increased? And then of course, the World Economic Forum consistently talks about what are the skills for 2020, for 2030. Now, in terms of the vision, what we want for 2030, this is one of the visions for the African continent. So if we just look at that slide about the future skills and future jobs, we can see how the fundamental skills have actually moved, as it were. So we're in 2020, so there's a new category called cognitive flexibility, for example. How do we take that into account when we set up our level descriptors? When we look at 2030, judgment and decision-making, number one, fluency of ideas, you would see there that in fact, what is needed for 2030, you know, and if you look at the level descriptors, it is not reflected in there. And therefore, what this is challenging us in the NQF movement is to really look seriously about what the future is wanting from us, that we don't just focus on the future, on the present and what we did in the past, we also need to be forward-looking. The next slide, please. So here, for example, I know there are different systems of taxonomy in terms of how learning is categorized, but you would see here that creativity is at the pinnacle. The argument that people are making now is that we actually need to have creativity, not from the school level already. We cannot just wait for it at NQF level 10 for creativity to be the key thing that we must be focusing on. The next slide, please. So here is another representation of that same taxonomy that actually places remembering, understanding, applying, and it then places creating, evaluating, and analyzing at the same level. So we actually need to think about our level descriptors in more creative ways than the way in which we thought about it before. Next slide. And when we speak about climate change, then we would see that very clearly that the projection that is made now is that the climate change would be worse than what COVID is. We feel COVID at the moment. We are sitting doing these webinars, and we are doing it remotely. Now imagine, power stations goes down, power lines go down, and in fact, we can't do anything. I mean, the massive winds and stuff coming in. So climate change is a very, very important thing that NQFs would have to think about as we go forward. Next slide, please. A lot of the discussion that people have is about electricity and electrical cars, for example. But in actual fact, it's only 25% of the problem. There's other issues like agriculture. Some people argue that if we look at cattle, that it actually is the third largest country in the world. So agriculture is a key thing that produces these gases, manufacturing, transportation, and buildings. So in other words, if we only tackle electricity, we will only be tackling 25% of the problem. So this, we must think much broader than simply about electricity. Next slide, please. So in conclusion then, Eduarda and colleagues, we have learned quite a lot today about national qualification frameworks in France, Portugal, and Mozambique, and Mauritius. There are key lessons that we can learn that we can move forward from here. I'm also saying, in addition to those lessons, we also need to think about the future in ways that we haven't thought before. And this pandemic, as well as the future, if we are not relevant there, then in actual fact, we will not be able to deal with the challenges. And I do think that the African Continental Qualifications Framework, in the way in which it's been laid out and rolled out, can assist all of us as a continent, as well as countries, individual countries, to take us forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe, for this marvelous speech to all of us, to our hearts, I think, first of all, because this is what really matters. Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions immediately to any of the speakers, including to Joe? Would you have any comments or question you would like to? If yes, please raise your hand. Come forward.
I raised a concern which was not answered.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Namubiru. So your question is about curriculum development. And it was a question asked in the beginning of this webinar.
Because I saw the concentration is on TVET and the universities. So I was wondering what is going to guide us at the best level.
Thank you. I'd like to ask any of the presenters, perhaps Robin, And also Joe, would you have a contribution to the question asked by Dr. Namubiru? And the question concerns curriculum development and also the inclusion, let's say, of school education and qualifications in this discussion on qualifications frameworks and ACQF. We have quite a number of contributions today that in a way give some elements of response to your question. So Dr. Gertrude Namubiru asked, the emphasis is much on TVET and universities, but how about basic education, especially now when many countries are reforming their curricula? What plans are in place to guide curriculum reforms? So the second part of the question, which plans are in place to guide curriculum reforms? This is a question to be addressed more to the individual countries. And if you want to speak from a continental perspective, I think you are very well placed since you are the leader of the curriculum cluster of CISA, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. But perhaps one of the countries that shared experiences today would like to say something about the first part, perhaps or what important reforms in their curricula, school curricula, are happening now, how this all relates also with the skills for the future that Joe just mentioned, or national qualifications frameworks development. If anyone, yes, okay, Doctor, from Morocco, Dr. Bakour, who is the director of the National Agency for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, would like to say, would like to give a contribution on this question. And of course, Monsieur Bakour, naturellement, vous avez compris que Madame Namubiru est surtout intéressée au de l'enseignement général, de l'enseignement scolaire, de l'éducation nationale, l'enseignement de base, derrière.
Avec plaisir. Merci, Edouard.
Mr. Bakour, French.
Alors, merci Eduarda. Alors, j'ai deux petites questions à notre collègue Madame Bouquet de France. Alors, la première, c'est après la réforme du janvier 2019, alors le nouveau CNC, est-ce qu'il est conforme au CEC? Parce que j'ai vu que c'est avec les 5 descripteurs, bon, alors surtout vous êtes engagé avec les autres pays de l'Union européenne de respecter le CEC, c'est-à-dire le cadre national doit être conforme au cadre européen. Alors, deuxième question, vous avez évoqué le diplôme d'ingénieur avec le système d'accréditation. Alors, qu'en est-il du rôle joué par la commission des titres d'ingénieur, la CTI? Voilà, merci.
Mais je peux répondre?
Oui.
May I answer?
Oui, tu peux répondre. Oui.
Okay. Our new framework has 8 levels, and we made through the decree which described the new qualification framework, let's say the way the qualifications of the old system in 5 levels would be integrated in the new one. But as you see, we have 8 levels now, but the first one is not really, I think we will not tell the Commission our level 1 is like the EQF level 1. This is still to be decided, but we have presented the new framework in June to the Commission, and we are supposed to present the referencing report in February. As we really worked for a national system, but also had an eye on the European descriptors, I hope things should go well. Was that did I answer the question?
Est-ce que la réponse vous a satisfait, Monsieur Bakour? I think that Teresa Duarte wanted to say something, contribute, isn't it, Teresa? Would you like to reply to any question or give a contribution on the question regarding curriculum, perhaps?
Sim. Relativamente ao currículo...
English, perhaps would you better for Dr. Namubiru, so she hears your reply directly, not through.
I will try. In Portugal, since 2019, we made a big reform related with general education. Now we have what we call essential learnings from the first cycle to the third cycle of education. We made work related with learning outcomes in all the disciplines of the curriculum. And 1 month ago, we finished that work also to the upper secondary education. So it was a big challenge. It was also a cooperation between institutions from the Ministry of Education, mainly, with the associations of teachers. They made the curriculum, and then there was a public consultation, and now those curriculums are finishing, and they are ready to be implemented this year. So I think it was a big work done by Portugal related with curriculum. All the big issues like climate change, entrepreneurship, and most of the issues that are very important now, we try to integrate them in the curriculum. That's all.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gertrude Namubiru, we really appreciate the fact that you are very consistent and you really try to link the issues and the developments related with curriculum in basic education, school education, with this discussion and work that is going to be done on the ACQF. So
but my concern is not answered well. Yeah, my concern is I expected the qualification frameworks to guide the curriculum development because they are at the exit level. We are looking at the exit profile of the learner, and also and we base on that to develop the curriculum, so that by the time the learner reaches the exit class, he or she has already acquired the competencies already set in the qualification framework. But your concentration is on the TVET and universities. What about the basic education level?
Sorry, Eduardo, can I respond to that question?
Please, Joe, you can, because
who is going to guide us so that we make the learners?
Please, Joe.
Yes. Okay. Let me say that, and I mean, I can use the South African example, that the point that Gertrude makes is quite an important one, that, you know, you get different types of qualification frameworks, and, you know, if the qualification framework is a comprehensive framework, then you know, schooling is part and parcel of the framework. So, for example, in South Africa, you know, there are there's a qualification, you know, that people are leaving the schooling with. It is called, in our case, the National Senior Certificate. The National Senior Certificate is a qualification that has been registered at NQF level 4 in a 10-level framework, and it outlines very clearly what are the outcomes that is expected of a learner, who passes, that NQF level 4 qualification. So from the perspective then of the curriculum is normally the responsibility of the Department of Education. They use that qualification, the outcome specified, and then what they then do is they develop the curriculum, so that the curriculum can teach towards those particular outcomes that has been specified. Now, I had spoken in general about the top skills for 2030 and the issue about creativity. Now, for example, in our level descriptors, creativity only comes in, at NQF level 10. And so what we would have to do going forward, thinking about this, is to then say, what are the implications for this, for curriculum development and so on? So that if one makes a change to the level descriptors, you would then have to build in creativity at different levels. And in fact, a number of people are arguing that what the schooling system is doing, the schooling system, in fact, it inhibits the creativity in children. So we would have to do other things. And so what they are putting forward is the idea of play, that children learn through play, and that in actual fact, we need to build in many more playful activities to be able to create and to encourage creativity within the children. So I'm saying that in itself is a big issue that is being taken up in various ways in the curriculum. So in South Africa, for example, they have set up a whole number of different groups throughout the country to see how can they encourage play at the early childhood development level, at grade 1, at grade 2, grade 3, and so on. So what I'm saying is there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done, but in essence, the conversation here is at the level of the outcome. And quite clearly, when we are thinking about this stuff at the ACQF level, we also need to think about, so how will the new thing look like, and what are the kinds of things that we need to put in place to assist with curriculum development and a whole range of other dimensions that has been mentioned here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Namubiru, we can continue the conversation in the next webinars, of course, and if you like, you can send us, you can also make a presentation about the work of the curriculum cluster. It would be perhaps very, very useful here also for our group. If you like, we can continue the conversation on by email. So colleagues, we are a bit now, let's say, very close to the closure of the webinar. But as always, we would like to please take 5 minutes of your time and patience. And for this, we would like to ask you to please prepare your smartphones. Let us do our very brief and easy assessment of main learnings from today's webinar, since this is a learning activity. Are you all ready with your smartphones? Let me just very briefly then share here the screen with this very, very simple explanatory presentation. So please, you can log in. You can go to your browser, internet browser, and log in this web internet address, www.menti.com. And then you will reach a place where you are asked for a code. And please enter this code, 4807-256. And there you have immediately the questions. There are 3 questions for our very brief assessment. So the question 1, I'm just presenting, and then my colleague Erika will put the actual instrument online. So, which are the main objectives of the Mauritius NQF? And you have just to write 3 words or 3 expressions in any language, English, French, or Portuguese. Then the question 2 is a multiple choice question and is about the level descriptors of the French National Qualifications Framework. Today, Brigitte gave us a very in-depth analysis and information about the level descriptors. And so the question is very simple. Which are the 3 domains of level descriptors of the French NQF? And you have a choice of among 7, you have to choose 3, not more than 3. So this is the second question. The third question, oui?
Please, je suis pas encore connecté. Si vous pouvez nous donner le code. Excusez-moi de revenir.
Okay.
Voilà. Alors, rapidement, merci.
Okay, there is the code. 4807255
Ah, j'arrive pas. Bah, c'est dommage.
Quand vous êtes dans Mentimeter. Erika, is the code correct?
Yes, the code is correct, but I will wait till you finish your presentation and then start the survey.
Okay. Then the third question is, which element of the 3 NQFs presented today are most important from the perspective of your institution? So what is it that is very important for your institution, for your country, let's say? And you have also choices, and you can choose up to 3 out of these 5 choices. One is the NQF is comprehensive, so all levels, types of qualifications, all from basic education to higher education. Then another option is that they have online registers of qualifications for visibility, transparency, and users use. Then the recognition of prior learning is linked with the NQF. It's a third option. The fourth option is governance on the basis of partnership, responsibility of all partners. And the fifth is the NQF is not static. It is able to evolve and to adapt to new demands, new trends and needs. So I stop sharing. And so now my colleague will start already the webinar, the Mentimeter exercise. So you can see there on the top the code 4807256. So many people are already replying. Dr. Robin, you will tell us if it's a good learning outcome. So the objectives of the NQF of Mauritius, as participants are writing.
Yes, indeed. It looks like the key ideas, key objectives are being well represented there. I can see was a couple of words in Portuguese.
Yes.
Empregabilidade. Comparability seems to be a big one, right?
Also, paridade is there, which is parity. End of the jungle, that's a nice one. So, qualifications. Comparability, transparency, governance, I see. Okay. So 15 persons are responding, are contributing, 17. You still have a few seconds if you want to add a couple of words on this question. So what do you remember from the objectives of the Mauritius NQF? End of the jungle is increasing. Okay. Okay. So 21 persons, colleagues have responded. Fine. Thank you. Some colleagues do not have connection sur Menti. It's a pity. I think it's the case of Morocco and also in a colleague from Senegal. Perhaps you want to try enter again, Monsieur Cissé. Now it's time, let us move then directly to the second question, which is a multiple choice question. So which are the descriptors of the French NQF? There are 3 domains of the descriptors of the French NQF. Can you choose them? Knowledge, skills, and responsibility and autonomy. Oh. Who has done this? Probably Brigitte. Okay. Oh, this was a good lesson. Everybody retained very well out of the many options, the 3 correct ones. Yeah, and we have also learned, for example, from the case of Portugal, that descriptor that appears there in yellow, responsibility, autonomy, that used to be in the EQF, first EQF, let's say, version called competence. In Portugal, the discussion went into the direction of considering this more under the angle of attitude. Oh, I see there is a variety appearing: teamwork, flexibility, adaptability. Probably these are wishes, aspirations. Also, that all these elements are also values that they should appear somehow in the level descriptors. Could be a good discussion for the ACQF. Okay, 21 persons, 22 have replied. Thank you very much. I see that everyone has a different, there are a number of different choices. If you all agree, then let us move to the last question. Yes, it is also a multiple choice question. I hope you can see very well on your mobile phones. So what are the most important elements that you take away from this session today, from these 3 experiences? What is it that is very important in your view for your country, for your institution? So the options are: the NQF is comprehensive, comprises and addresses all levels, types, subsectors of qualifications. Interesting. So many people are voting for that first, comprehensive. Oh, I see that the recognition of prior learning, or la VAE, ou bien le RVCC, are also getting many votes. And the highest number of votes is that the NQFs are not static. They have to evolve and adapt to new demands, new trends, and new big challenges, as the ones we are all facing now globally, that were very well addressed by Joe in his discussion presentation, and also by the presentations of our 3 cases, 3 countries. So 24 persons have replied. Please, Erika, would you like then just to show the final results to complete this brief assessment, interactive assessment? The final results, starting from the first question. So the objectives of the Mauritius NQF, we had 22 responses: comparability, transparency, mobility, end of the jungle, classification, governance, alignment are on the top of the choices here. The next one, So which are the level descriptors? This is a bit of a technical question, but quite fundamental, because this is the first webinar in which we really have looked in detail at the level descriptions, level descriptors issue. So both in the case of the Portugal and France as well. So the discussions around the level descriptors and the final understanding and definitions. Thank you. And the next question then. So I think that all countries value the fact that NQFs are not static, they evolve, they adapt. This requires naturally a capacity to monitor them, also to evaluate them, to choose new solutions or new directions. Then we have the comprehensiveness, the large, wide scope of the NQFs as the second choice, and then also the RPL. And this is really interesting, very important. So the recognition of prior learning, of competences acquired in non-formal and informal contexts. This is fundamental for lifelong learning and also for inclusion. And I think this is where the NQFs can play an important role in this big problem that was exacerbated or pinpointed by COVID-19 about inequalities, big divides. So NQFs have elements, have tools that can help address this big problem of inequality, social, digital, etc. So we conclude then this webinar, and we will meet again on the 24th of September. Please pencil in already in your calendars, your agendas. You are all most welcome. You are also welcome to invite your colleagues from your departments to send the links also to other departments, higher education, basic education, curriculum development, also social partners interested in this discussion, in these kind of topics. Maybe I would like just to say also a final word about what was quite impressive and important in the discussion today, to be just 30 seconds. I heard a lot the word valoriser, value, valorize, if this can be said in English. So give visibility and value to competences that are acquired in various ways, skills acquired in various ways. So the diversity of learning modalities that is so fundamental nowadays, and NQFs are able to capture this. We heard a lot about the learning outcomes approach as being fundamental to make this happen. This wide scope and this ability to capture the diversity of ways of learning throughout life. The clear distinction between quality assurance of training and quality assurance of qualifications. Maybe this is an important point to bear in mind also for the ACQF conversation later on. The transparency, the use of level descriptors as a reference for development of qualifications and of curricula and assessment criteria, etc., that are necessary, of course, to achieve qualifications. The question of governance, so underlining the role of sectors, of the industry, of various stakeholders in all discussions. And we have seen this in various ways throughout the three most important presentations today. And maybe just to conclude, the question that was put forward upfront by Joe Samuels about policy learning from each other, to create not only a common understanding about many things, even when there are different approaches, when there are diverse angles and perspectives and needs, but creating also this mutual understanding. And Joe, for example, mentioned learning from systems like in English-speaking countries and Portuguese-speaking countries. All these various groups of countries, let's say, have achievements, have ways of addressing perhaps also common challenges and common objectives. And this is very important to learn from various solutions and various perspectives. And finally, COVID. COVID has to stay, let's say, the effects and the recovery from COVID. The silver linings also from COVID, they are there, have to be part of the conversation further in NQF's development and consolidation, and also in the ACQF process further on. I'd like to say big thank you to all of you, all colleagues who stayed connected until now, and for I'd say also the good mood and good atmosphere that is part of these webinars. So we meet again, if you all want to join again, on the 24th of September. And we hope then, if it's confirmed from Morocco, we hope to have Morocco presenting its national qualifications framework. We hope to have our dear Tarek Al-Sindi, Dr. Tarek Al-Sindi, presenting Bahrain national qualifications framework, and also the Arab qualifications framework, a regional overarching framework. Mr. Tarek Al-Sindi has very interesting news and information coming out also of the way how Bahrain addressed the COVID-19 crisis through the national qualifications framework. It would be very welcome. And we hope also to have CAMES, which is the Conseil africain pour l'enseignement supérieur en Afrique, sharing with us also the good practice they have in quality assurance of higher education qualifications in the francophone.
Les toilettes, il faut afficher le. Je ne sais pas le cool. Vous êtes étudiant. Les deux.
Sorry. I see that many colleagues are
Mais
right.
regardez, si là-bas vous pouvez.
Okay, colleague, you can mute the microphone. We know it's the webinar.
Il y a le son dedans.
Please, you have all the presentations on the webpage. The video of the webinar will be made available very soon in the coming days. So the link you can have, you can see it in French, Portuguese, and in English in the YouTube channel. And we stay in touch for the next workshop. Any questions you might have, in addition to those that are in the chat box now, and wishes also that you have, so lots of formulations of need to further cooperate, need to further exchange on national qualifications and qualifications. This all has to be continued. This is why we are trying to organize these discussions in a structured manner. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Try to keep your mood high despite the big problems we are all facing, all the world, all countries, each one of us. And see you on the 24th of September again. It is really a pleasure to be with all of you. Muito obrigada, caros colegas de todos os países. Merci beaucoup à tous.
Ciao.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
أهلا مرحبا.
And please let's
تحياتي.
show
الحمد
your
لله.
Deus.
everybody. You can open your
Shall we take a group picture for the website?
Yes, yes, you can. I'm doing a screenshot, and I can take also a picture. And you can also inform your colleagues and put information on your websites. CAMES already did it recently, so let us do it. Dieudonné, I want to see your face, please. Maxwell, also Colleen, Pedro, everybody, Maria Madalena, please. And Doutora Down, por favor. Everybody.
Hi, Eduarda.
Hi, Maxwell. I hope you are doing better.
Yes, I'm good.
يا هانسن ازيك؟
الحمد لله. كيفك دكتور طارق؟
الله يخليك.
شوفك الأحد إن شاء الله.
شاء الله لحد ان شاء الله دكتوره.
إن شاء الله إن شاء الله.
And a big thank you to our interpreters. A big thank you to interpreters, John, Elio, Ellie, and the last colleague is the Francophone colleague who wants to say his name. And a big thank you, please, to my colleagues from European Training Foundation, who are Sylvia and Erika. They are behind the steering wheel, let's say, of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Finally, we have Pauline on the screen. Yes, you cannot. You have to use us. And Dieudonné, you don't want to show yourself? Thank you very much.
Thank
we
you.
can bye and see you next time.
Right.
In 14 days exactly, 24th of September. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Stay safe. Thank you so much.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.